Hello and welcome to the Velvet Past. Did the ancient healers truly touch the veil between worlds? Or did their instruments merely carve pathways to oblivion? Across the silent, shadowed dawns of prehistory, long before the whisper of recorded history, when the very earth itself felt new and untamed, humanity first dared to pierce the skull. This was not a tentative step into the unknown, but a bold, desperate thrust into the deepest sanctuary of the self, a silent gamble against forces unseen and terrifying. Imagine, if you can, a Neolithic dawn, the air thick with the acrid scent of wood smoke and the primal temps of fear, as the first rays of a hesitant sun barely kissed the horizon. Around a flickering hearth, where embers glowed like watchful eyes, a figure, a shaman, a medicine man, a keeper of ancient secrets, raises a crude flint against a throbbing cranium. The silence is profound, broken only by the ragged breath of the afflicted, and perhaps the distant howl of a wolf, echoing the anguish that hangs heavy in the pre-dawn chill. This wasn't merely surgery as we understand it. It was an act of desperate faith, a primal ritual to release demons of madness or pain, to lure back a wandering spirit, or perhaps to simply quiet the storm within. The story of the trepanned skull begins in a time when the world was a canvas of raw, untamed elements, and humanity lived in intimate, often brutal, harmony with nature. Settlements were clusters of mud and thatch, vulnerable to the whim of seasons and the caprice of unknown illnesses. In this dimly lit world, pain was a relentless companion, and disease an inscrutable curse, often attributed to malevolent spirits, angered ancestors, or a fundamental imbalance in the cosmic order. When a member of the tribe succumbed to fits, screamed at phantoms, or suffered from a persistent, agonizing headache, it was not merely a physical malady, it was a breach, a tear in the fabric of their very being, a crisis that demanded a radical, almost sacred, intervention. The decision to trepan, to make an opening in the living bone of the skull, was undoubtedly fraught with terror. Yet it became a widely practiced procedure across continents and millennia, from the windswept plains of ancient Peru to the misty hills of Neolithic Europe, from the vast steppes of Central Asia to the sun-baked lands of ancient Egypt. Each unearthed skull, a silent witness to agonizing interventions, tells a fragmented story of courage, desperation, and the relentless human quest for relief. Some bear small, circular holes, meticulously scraped or drilled with rudimentary instruments of flint, obsidian, or sharpened bone. Others reveal larger, more irregular openings, suggesting a more frantic, less controlled assault on the skull. The edges of these ancient wounds tell their own tale. Some show clear signs of regrowth, the bone having healed around the opening, hinting at survival, perhaps even recovery. Others, however, lead directly to the void, dark and unforgiving, a grim testament to procedures that ended in swift, final oblivion. What drove these ancient practitioners to such audacious acts? Was it the sudden, terrifying onset of epilepsy, transforming a familiar face into a writhing, unknowable torment? Was it the incessant, skull-splitting agony of migraines, driving the afflicted to the brink of madness? Or was it the terrifying possession of spirits, the whispers of the unseen world invading the fragile sanctuary of the mind? The truth, perhaps, lies in a blend of these desperate motivations. For a crushing headache that would not yield, a hole in the skull might have seemed a logical, albeit terrifying, release of pressure. For the erratic behavior of mental illness, it was a physical portal to expel the invisible entities believed to be causing the torment. and for a fractured skull, perhaps from a tribal skirmish or an accidental fall, trepannation was a way to alleviate swelling and pressure, to mend the broken vessel of the mind. The tools themselves were marvels of primitive ingenuity and frightening simplicity. Sharpened flakes of obsidian, flints honed to a razor's edge, even shark teeth or pieces of shell would have served as scalpels and drills. Imagine the slow, painstaking process, the skin carefully peeled back, exposing the pulsating bone beneath. Then the rhythmic scraping, the grinding, the terrifying sound of stone against bone. A sound that must have echoed in the silence of the night, a symphony of agony and hope. The process could take hours, perhaps even days, pushing the limits of human endurance for both patient and practitioner. There was no anesthetic beyond a numbing poultice of herbs, a draught of fermented drink, or perhaps simply the sheer willpower and stoicism of the afflicted dot. The survival rates of these ancient surgeries are a source of both wonder and dread. Evidence of bone regrowth on many trepanned skulls suggests that a significant number of individuals did, in fact, survive the immediate trauma of the procedure. What became of them afterward? Did the madness lift? Did the pain subside? Or did they carry the chilling mark of their ordeal? A permanent opening to the world within, a silent testimony to a gamble with life and death. The reasons behind this ancient, brutal artistry remain shrouded in the mist of time, obscured by the vast distances of forgotten centuries. We can only infer from the silent language of bone, from the cultural echoes of belief in spirits and vital energies, from the universal human desire to alleviate suffering. And so, as we close our eyes on this chilling chapter, we are left to wonder, were the ancient healers truly tapping into some profound, forgotten knowledge, accessing the spiritual realm through the open skull? Or were they merely carving pathways to oblivion, their desperate cures often leading to a swifter, more agonizing end? The whispers they sought to silence, were they within the afflicted mind, or did they echo from a world beyond? A realm of primal fears and invisible forces that even today, in our age of scientific certainty, we still struggle to fully comprehend. The trepanned skull, a relic of profound human suffering and audacious courage, remains a haunting emblem of medicine's earliest, most terrifying steps, forever echoing the whispers of the divine and the dark void within. What secrets did the Nile's shifting sands bury beneath their golden dunes, and what horrifying cures did they yield from the crucible of an ancient wisdom? Journey with me now, across the vast, hushed expanse of millennia, back to the sun-baked banks of ancient Egypt. Here, the grandeur of pyramids stood sentinel, immutable against the relentless march of time, silent guardians over a civilization, obsessed with life and its fleeting breath, with death and the promise of eternal return, and with the intricate, often confounding, workings of the human form. The air itself seemed to hum with ancient power, a pervasive magic woven into the very fabric of existence, where gods walked among mortals, and illness was often a shadow cast by divine displeasure or the insidious touch of unseen forces. In this land of paradoxes, where monumental architecture soared to the heavens, yet knowledge was painstakingly etched onto fragile papyrus, lies one of history's most chilling medical testaments, the Ebers Papyrus. Discovered in the mid-19th century amidst the dusty silence of a tomb near Luxor, its unrolling was like the slow unfurling of a forgotten dream, a whisper from 1550 BCE, within its fragile threads, stretching over 110 pages of hieratic script, a medical text of staggering breadth and unsettling remedies lay preserved. It was a compendium of cures, incantations, and anatomical observations, a window into a world where the line between healing and horror was not merely blurred, but often utterly erased. Envisioned the meticulous scribes, their hands stained with black ink and the vibrant hues of crushed herbs, their concentration absolute as they recorded treatments for ailments both mundane and bizarre. Picture the dim light of a lamp flickering over their bent forms, illuminating the methodical strokes of their reeds, each symbol a prayer, a prescription, a desperate plea against the ravages of disease. For the ancient Egyptians, the body was a vessel, sacred yet vulnerable, constantly assailed by malevolent spirits, corrupt humors, and the mysterious whims of the gods. And their remedies, as meticulously documented as their monumental tombs, reflect this profound, often terrifying worldview. Consider, if you dare, the precise instructions for a crocodile dung pessary, prescribed not for sanitation, but for contraception. Imagine the desperate woman yearning for control over her own fate. Subjected to such an unspeakable insertion, the chilling belief in its efficacy overriding revulsion. The very thought conjures images of unlit chambers, hushed whispers, and the grim determination to exert some measure of power over the unpredictable flow of life. Was it effective? Perhaps only in its sheer repulsiveness, deterring intimacy more surely than any chemical barrier. Yet it stood as a testament to that unwavering belief in the power of the natural world, however grotesque, to bend to human will. But the papyrus held darker secrets still. Remedies involving lizards, blood, and putrid meat were prescribed for infections, for wounds that festered and refused to heal. Try to conjure the smell, the nauseating stench of decaying flesh mixed with the sharp, metallic temps of blood, all prepared and applied to open sores. In a world without understanding of microscopic invaders, the visible decay of one substance was perhaps thought to counteract the unseen decay within the body. Was it a form of sympathetic magic, a grim mirroring of the disease to draw it out, or a desperate gamble, a frantic throwing of anything at the encroaching darkness, hoping something, anything, would stick? The patient, racked with fever and pain, would have submitted to this horrifying application, their hope a thin, fragile thread against the encroaching shadow of death. Other remedies ventured further into the realm of the truly macabre, for eye ailments, distressingly common in the dusty, sun-drenched land, formulations included human brains, ground and mixed with honey, smeared directly onto the afflicted eye. Imagine the cold, viscous sensation, the overwhelming thought of what you are applying to the most delicate of organs. For coughs and respiratory issues, certain prescriptions called for mouse droppings or the blood of a pig mixed into a noxious brew. The desperate gulping down of such foul concoctions, the shudder that must have run through the patient's frame, speaks volumes about the utter lack of alternatives. The grim choice between slow suffering and a horrifying, yet perhaps hopeful, cure. The Ebers Papyrus reveals a profound irony. The same civilization that pioneered sophisticated mummification, demonstrating an unparalleled understanding of anatomy gained through the intricate process of preserving the dead, simultaneously embraced medical practices that, to our modern sensibilities, seem utterly barbaric. They meticulously removed organs during embalming, identifying them, placing them in canopic jars. Yet this advanced anatomical knowledge did not translate into a sterile, scientific approach to treating the living. Instead, magic and medicine were inextricably intertwined. Incantations were recited alongside prescriptions, rituals performed to appease deities, and amulets worn to ward off illness. The physician was often also a priest, a sorcerer, a diviner. Bridging the mundane and the spiritual. Did they truly believe in the efficacy of such grotesque concoctions? These lizards, blood poultices, and dung suppositories? Or was there a desperate, pragmatic logic in a world without understanding of microbes, of sterile technique, of chemical compounds beyond those found in nature? Perhaps the power of belief, the sheer psychological weight of a ritual performed by a revered healer, provided a placebo effect strong enough to offer comfort, if not always a cure. Perhaps the sheer unpleasantness of the treatment was itself seen as a sign of its potency, a punishment endured for the cleansing of the body. The Egyptians lived in a world where the unseen was as real, if not more real, than the seen. Disease was a spiritual battle as much as a physical one, and the remedies were weapons wielded in both realms. The Ebers Papyrus offers us a chilling, yet invaluable, window into this ancient world, a testament to humanity's tireless, often terrifying, efforts to conquer suffering and death. It forces us to confront the unholy rituals performed in the name of health, the desperate gambles taken in the face of incomprehensible ailments. As the papyrus slowly unrolled, revealing its secrets, it brought not only a glimpse of ancient medical knowledge, but also a stark reminder of the profound fear that gnawed at the hearts of those who lived in the shadow of disease, and the unspeakable lengths to which they would go for a fragile whisper of hope. The echoes of those desperate pleas, the ghostly touch of the serpent's wisdom, still resonate from the ancient, sun-drenched lands, a chilling lullaby from the dawn of medicine. When the heavens themselves dictated suffering, when the great celestial bodies wheeled in their immutable courses, casting shadows of misfortune upon the mortal coil. Did the healers of ancient Babylon truly believe that blood, the very river of life, held the cure? Did they gaze upon the crimson flow, not with revulsion, but with a sacred certainty that within its viscous warmth lay the key to purification, to restoration, to a rebalancing of the soul's terrestrial vessel? Let us journey now to the sprawling, sun-drenched plains of Mesopotamia, to a time when towering ziggurats, built of sun-baked brick, stretched towards the heavens, their terraces reaching for the very stars that charted the destiny of kings and commoners alike. In this ancient land, where the Tigris and Euphrates intertwined like sinews of life, and where omens were meticulously read in the stars, the flights of birds, or the entrails of sacrificed beasts, disease was rarely seen as a mere physical affliction. No, it was often a divine punishment, a malevolent spirit's touch, or a disruption of the delicate cosmic harmony that governed all existence. Within the bustling cities, beneath the shadow of monumental gates adorned with mythical beasts, one could find the shadowed chambers of a Babylonian temple hospital. The air within these sacred, yet often grim, spaces hung heavy. It was a potent mixture of pungent incense, burning herbs meant to ward off evil, and a faint, yet pervasive, metallic tanther, unmistakable scent of blood. Here, amidst the murmuring of prayers and the hushed movements of priests and physicians, the practice of bloodletting was not merely common. It was a cornerstone of their medical philosophy, a ritual deeply ingrained in their understanding of the human body and its connection to the cosmos. For the Babylonians, influenced by even earlier Mesopotamian traditions, the body was a microcosm, mirroring the grand, complex universe. Illness was an imbalance, a corruption, a stagnation of vital forces, or an invasion by demonic entities that thrived on disorder. And the only path to purity, to expelling these malevolent influences or restoring equilibrium, was through extraction, through the deliberate, often copious, draining of blood. It was believed that disease resided in the blood, or that an excess of blood itself caused the affliction, choking the life force rather than sustaining it. To release this bad blood was to release the sickness, to offer a sacrifice of the self for the sake of restoration. Imagine the scene: a patient, perhaps racked with fever, their skin burning, their eyes dulled with suffering, lies upon a simple mat or stone slab. The physician, often a priest-healer known as an ASU, approaches with solemnity, his movements deliberate and ritualistic. He might consult his clay tablets, etched with omens and astrological charts, determining the most auspicious moment for the bloodletting, perhaps even the precise vein to be opened, guided by the position of the planets or the phases of the moon. The instruments themselves were terrifying in their simplicity and stark effectiveness. Bowls of various sizes lay ready, some crafted from coarse ceramic, others from gleaming bronze, waiting to receive the crimson offering. For the incision, the physician might use a sharp bronze blade, a lancet of flint, or even the venomous-looking point of a leech's proboscis. There was no understanding of sterile technique, no thought of invisible pathogens that might enter. The body through the very wound meant to heal. The air, thick with human breath and the subtle dust of centuries, carried unseen dangers. As the chosen vein was opened, a dark, pulsing stream would begin to flow into the waiting bowl. The sight, for both the afflicted and the practitioner, must have been profoundly impactful. It was a tangible release, a visible shedding of life, yet imbued with the sacred promise of healing. With each drop, there was a belief that the illness was departing, that balance was slowly being restored. The volume of blood extracted would vary, but historical texts and archaeological findings suggest that often it was a significant amount, often with little regard for the patient's already weakened state. A body already struggling against disease, perhaps dehydrated by fever, would be further depleted, their strength ebbing away with each crimson surge. Consider the consequences: fainting, dizziness, extreme weakness, and even death from hypovolemic shock. Yet, for the Babylonians, these outcomes might have been interpreted as the ultimate triumph of the healing ritual. The patient had undergone a profound cleansing, perhaps even transcending the earthly realm, their spirit freed from the diseased body. The unwavering belief in the power of bloodletting, despite its often devastating effects, speaks to a medical system rooted deeply in superstition, religious dogma, and a profound misunderstanding of human physiology. It was a time when desperate measures were often the only recourse against the unknown ravages of disease, and the visible act of bleeding offered a tangible, ritualistic form of intervention. The legacy of Babylonian bloodletting would stretch far beyond the Fertile Crescent, influencing medical practices for millennia, permeating the humoral theories of ancient Greece and Rome, and lingering even into the medieval and early modern periods of Europe. It was a practice born of a specific worldview, one where the human body was inextricably linked to the cosmos, where suffering was a divine message, and where blood was both the essence of life and the vessel of affliction. As we turn our gaze from the shadowed temple hospitals of Babylon and the crimson legacy of their bleeding bowls, we are left with a stark, unsettling testament. It is a testament to humanity's enduring struggle against the inexplicable nature of illness, to the terrifying beauty of absolute conviction, and to the chilling reality that in the ancient world, the path to healing was often paved with pain, desperation, and a profound ritualistic understanding of the body's deepest secrets. The metallic temps of that ancient blood still seems to hang in the air, a silent echo of a time when life itself was drained away in the name of a cure under the watchful, indifferent eyes of the unyielding stars. Did the revered physician truly understand the body's intricate dance, or was his towering legacy built upon a foundation of pain and flawed conjecture? Let us now step into the bustling, intellectual heart of the Roman Empire, a sprawling dominion of stone and ambition, where the teachings of Galen of Pergamon cast a long, unyielding shadow over centuries of medical practice. His was a name whispered with reverence, his texts copied and recopied, his authority almost divine. Yet, beneath this veneer of brilliance lay a medical philosophy that, by modern standards, veered into realms of considerable suffering. Galen, born in Pergamon around 129 AD, was a physician of immense intellect and prolific output. He was a master anatomist, though his dissections were almost exclusively performed on animals, pigs, monkeys, and even elephants, leading to profound misconceptions when applied to the human form. His grand, overarching theory, which would dominate Western medicine for over 1,500 years, was the theory of the four humours. He believed the human body was composed of four fundamental fluids: blood, yellow, bile, black bile, and phlegm. Each humour was associated with specific organs, temperaments, and even seasons. Health, in Galen's view, was a precarious balance of these humours. Disease, therefore, was an imbalance, an excess or deficiency of one or more of these vital fluids. Imagine a grand Roman villa, its cool marble floors reflecting the flickering lamplight, its air heavy with the scent of wealth and illness. Patrician, perhaps, lies upon a velvet couch, racked with a fever. According to Galen's teachings, such a fever might be caused by an excess of blood, or perhaps an overabundance of yellow bile. The physician, armed with Galen's voluminous texts and his own profound conviction, would prescribe a course of aggressive intervention aimed at restoring balance. This often meant a relentless battery of purges, emetics, and bloodletting. Picture the patient, already weakened by the ravages of illness, now subjected to potent emetics designed to induce violent vomiting. They would be given strong purgatives, causing agonizing bouts of diarrhea, further dehydrating an already vulnerable body. And then the grim ritual of bloodletting would commence, perhaps from an arm vein, the crimson stream flowing into a waiting basin. This wasn't a gentle process. It was often copious, designed to extract significant quantities of blood, sometimes over multiple sessions. The patient's strength would ebb with each pint lost, their face growing paler, their breath more shallow. The irony, of course, was that such aggressive treatments often worsened the patient's condition, weakening their immune system, leading to dehydration, and leaving them even more susceptible to the very infections the physician was trying to fight. Yet, the logic was unassailable within Galen's framework. If the illness was caused by an excess, then removal was the only logical path to healing. Galen's influence was monumental, not only because of his comprehensive writings, but also due to his unwavering confidence and his integration of philosophy with medicine. His pronouncements were seen as divine truth, his systems so internally coherent that they resisted challenge for centuries. When a patient died despite aggressive bloodletting or purging, It was not the theory that was questioned, but rather the severity of the imbalance or the will of fate. The concept of iatrogenesis, or harm caused by the healer, was barely comprehended. The physician was simply doing their best within the accepted framework. The profound tragedy lies in the sheer endurance of these theories. For over a millennium and a half, countless individuals across vast swathes of the ancient and medieval world suffered through these often counterproductive and painful interventions. From the bustling streets of Rome to the quiet monasteries of medieval Europe, the rhythm of purging and bleeding, based on Galen's unshakable authority, defined medical practice. The sheer human capacity for stoicism, or perhaps simply the lack of alternatives, meant that generations endured treatments that often prolonged their agony or hastened their demise, as the flickering lamp casts long shadows across the pages of Galen's ancient texts. We are forced to confront the enduring power of dogma over observable truth. His genius, while undeniable in its intellectual ambition and systematic approach, inadvertently ushered in an era of medical practice where well-intentioned interventions frequently inflicted profound suffering. The trail of silent agony, the unseen tears of countless patients subjected to these painful purges and copious bloodlettings, remains a chilling legacy of a time when the pursuit of balance often pushed the human body to its very limits, leaving us to ponder the true cost of revered wisdom and the knife's edge between healing and harm. Asterisk. What unspeakable horror unfolded within the hallowed, illuminated halls of Alexandria, where the insatiable thirst for knowledge was pursued at the ultimate, chilling cost. Journey with me now, across the shimmering waters of time, to the vibrant, intellectual crucible of Hellenistic Egypt. Here, at the delta of the mighty Nile, stood Alexandria, a city of unparalleled splendor, a beacon of learning in the ancient world. Its jewel was the legendary library, a colossal repository of human thought, where scrolls whispered the wisdom of ages. Yet, within the very shadow of this monument to enlightenment, a dark and controversial chapter of medical history is said to have unfolded, a tale that chills the very soul. It was here, in the burgeoning medical schools of Alexandria during the 3rd century BCE, that two figures rose to prominence, Herophilus of Chalcedon and Erasistratus of Chios. These were not ordinary physicians. They were pioneers, driven by an unyielding desire to understand the intricate workings of the human body, to strip away the veils of ignorance that had shrouded internal anatomy for centuries. Up until their time, human dissection was largely taboo, forbidden by religious and cultural strictures. Knowledge of internal organs was rudimentary, based primarily on the study of animals or the examination of external injuries. But Herophilus and Erasistratus dared to push the boundaries, to challenge the very foundations of accepted knowledge. And so, the chilling whispers began. It is said that in their relentless pursuit of anatomical understanding, Herophilus and Erasistratus performed something unthinkable: vivisection on living human beings, not on unwilling subjects seized from the streets, but on condemned criminals, those already sentenced to death. Imagine the scene: a dimly lit chamber, perhaps beneath the very library itself, where the air was thick with the scent of anticipation and dread. The condemned, their faces etched with fear and despair, would be brought forth. Then, with an almost terrifying clinical detachment, the surgeons would begin their work, not to heal, but to observe, to learn, to dissect a living, breathing, screaming specimen. Think of the instruments: sharp bronze scalpels, delicate probes, all designed to lay bare the intricate network of nerves, muscles, and organs. The human body, alive and responsive, its pain receptors fully functional, its heart still beating, would be systematically opened. The physicians would trace the pathways of arteries and veins, identify the true nature of the brain and its connection to the nervous system, observe the functions of the lungs and the rhythm of the stomach. Each tremor, each gasp, each desperate cry would be a data point, a chilling revelation in their quest for unparalleled anatomical knowledge. This was the ultimate empiricism, a direct, unfiltered glimpse into the very engine of life. The ethical enormity of such acts, even if performed on individuals already condemned to die, remains a stark testament to a relentless thirst for knowledge that pushed, and perhaps shattered, the boundaries of human morality. The precise details of these vivisections, the number performed, the exact methods used, all are lost to time, known only through fragmentary historical accounts, whispers from ancient chroniclers like Celsus and Tertullian, who themselves reacted with varying degrees of horror and justification. Were these accounts exaggerated, sensationalized? Perhaps, but the very fact that such a practice was even contemplated, let alone recorded, speaks volumes about the intellectual and moral climate of a time when the pursuit of scientific understanding could override almost any other consideration. The legacy of the Alexandria anatomists is therefore a profound paradox. On one hand, their alleged vivisections undeniably led to groundbreaking discoveries. Herophilus accurately distinguished between arteries and veins, described the optic nerve, and recognized the brain as the center of the nervous system. Erasistratus made significant contributions to the understanding of the heart and circulatory system. They pushed the boundaries of anatomical knowledge far beyond anything previously conceived, laying foundations that would endure for centuries. On the other hand, their methods remain a chilling ethical stain, a reminder of the darkness that can accompany even the most noble intellectual pursuits. As we withdraw from the hallowed yet haunted halls of ancient Alexandria, the chilling whisper of the living blade still seems to echo. It is a whisper of profound knowledge gained at an unimaginable cost, a testament to a pursuit so relentless that it embraced unimaginable suffering. The precise truth of those desperate cries, whether rumor or reality, remains an unsolved mystery, leaving only the unsettling echo of a human thirst for understanding that, in its most extreme form, dared to violate the very essence of life itself, seeking enlightenment in the raw, exposed agony of another. Asterisk, what unspeakable rites did the ancient embalmers perform, their hands stained with natron and sacred oils, all to grant a pharaoh, or even a commoner, a fleeting promise of eternal life, and at what gruesome cost to the mortal coil. Descend with me now into the shadowed sanctums of ancient Egypt, to the hallowed, yet often terrifying, spaces where the boundary between life and death was not merely acknowledged, but meticulously managed through sacred, yet horrifying, rituals. Here, in the warbit, or place of purification, the earthly vessel of the deceased would undergo a transformation, a brutal yet divine metamorphosis, preparing it for the arduous journey into the duat, the perilous underworld for the ancient Egyptians. Death was not an ending, but a passage, a sacred transition that required the body to be preserved intact, a recognizable home for the soul, or ka, and the personality, or ba, to return to. Without the body, the deceased could not achieve immortality. This profound belief fueled the elaborate and often gruesome art of mummification, a process that could take up to 70 days, a prolonged dance with decay and spiritual preservation, envision. The skilled embalmers, a specialized caste of priests and artisans, their faces perhaps covered with linen masks to ward off the stench, their hands accustomed to the intimate grotesquerie of death. The air would be thick with the sharp scent of frankincense, myrrh, and cedar oil, mingled with the cloying sweetness of decomposition. The work began swiftly, for the body's integrity was paramount. The first, and perhaps most disturbing, step involved the extraction of the brain. Imagine the long, slender hook, often made of bronze, inserted through the nostril, then carefully manipulated to liquefy and extract the brain matter, allowing it to drain out. This grisly procedure, performed with a detached precision, was likely done without ceremony, as the brain was not considered a vital organ for the afterlife, perhaps even viewed as a mere useless organ, or a source of corruption. Next came the removal of the internal organs, a far more intricate and ritualistic process. A long, often deep, incision would be made on the left side of the abdomen. Through this opening, the embalmers would meticulously reach in and remove the stomach, intestines, liver, and lungs. The heart, however, was almost always left in place, revered as the seat of intelligence, emotion, and life itself, crucial for judgment in the afterlife. Each removed organ would be carefully cleaned, sometimes treated with spices and resins, and then placed into specialized canopic jars, each lid shaped like the head of one of the four sons of Horus, who protected these vital components. The kidneys, being more difficult to access, were sometimes left in situ. The body cavity, now hollowed and pristine, would then be thoroughly rinsed with palm wine, a potent antiseptic, and a mixture of pounded spices. Following this, it would be meticulously packed with natron salt, a naturally occurring mineral compound found in dried lake beds. The body would be left for 40 days to dehydrate completely, the natron absorbing all moisture, preventing decay. Picture the hushed stillness of the embalming workshop, the desiccating bodies lying exposed, slowly shrinking, transforming, their skin darkening to a leathery texture, their features becoming stark and skeletal. After this prolonged drying period, the natron would be removed, and the shrunken cavity would be repacked with linen, sawdust, or other aromatics to restore a semblance of the body's former shape. Finally, the elaborate wrapping would begin. Countless meters of fine linen bandages, often treated with resin, would be meticulously wound around the entire body, each finger and toe wrapped individually, prayers and amulets often placed between the layers for protection on the journey to the afterlife. The face, sometimes covered with a painted mask, would be the last part to be adorned. A final semblance of life before the sarcophagus sealed away the eternal dream. The sheer inventiveness, the methodical removal of vital organs, the complete dehumanization of the deceased body once the spirit had departed was a process designed for transcendence, yet it reads like an elaborate, ritualistic dismemberment. The tools, glistening with ancient residue, the pervasive smells of death, spices and preservative salts, the utter disregard for the earthly vessel's integrity, all for the promise of eternity. It leaves a haunting echo of profound reverence intertwined with an almost clinical revulsion. The precise knowledge of anatomy gained through this process, however, did not always translate into advanced medical care for the living. The were not physicians. They were specialists in death, their focus on preservation rather than healing. Yet, their grim trade provided an unparalleled insight into the human form, an understanding that would influence later medical thought. As the heavy stone lid of the sarcophagus slid into place, sealing away the meticulously prepared body. It closed not just on a pharaoh or a noble, but on a testament to a civilization's profound belief in life beyond death, purchased at an unimaginable, gruesome cost. The sacred gutter, where the brain drained, and the canopic jars, holding the precious viscera, remain silent witnesses to a time when humanity embraced the horrifying to achieve the divine, leaving a haunting legacy of ancient rituals performed in the very shadow of eternity. When the clang of swords ceased echoing across the blood-soaked earth, and the last desperate cries of battle faded into the twilight, what new, chilling horrors awaited the fallen on the Roman battlefield? The glory of Roman conquest, etched in stone and triumph, often belied the savage reality endured by its soldiers. Let us stand now amidst the mud and blood of a Roman encampment after a brutal clash, the air still thick with the metallic scent of iron and the acrid tents of sweat and fear. Here, beneath the harsh light of torches, the true, brutal face of ancient medicine revealed itself. Roman medicine, though often practical, organized, and surprisingly advanced in some areas, constantly grappled with the sheer scale of trauma inflicted by warfare. The legions, disciplined and efficient in killing, also needed disciplined and efficient methods of treating their wounded to preserve their fighting strength. Surgical instruments, unearthed from archaeological sites across the vast Roman Empire, hint at a sophistication of technique and a grim necessity. They include bone saws, sharp scalpels, forceps, drills, and an array of probes, all designed for intrusion and repair. Imagine the makeshift infirmary, often a tent or a simple open-air space behind the lines, the cries of the wounded pierced, the night mingling with the groans of the dying. Here, the Roman field surgeon, known as a medicus, or even a physician attached to the legions, would begin his grim work. These were men of hardened resolve, accustomed to the sight of mangled flesh and shattered bone. Their patients, soldiers of Rome, were expected to display virtues, courage, and stoicism even in the face of agonizing procedures. The most common, and perhaps most terrifying, intervention was amputation. When a limb was shattered by a mace, torn by a chariot wheel, or infected by a festering wound, amputation was often the only recourse to prevent gangrene, a creeping death that would consume the entire body. Picture the scene: a soldier, perhaps a young recruit, lies on a crude table, his limb mangled beyond repair. There was no anesthesia as we know it, no ether, no chloroform, perhaps a draught of wine mixed with opium, if available, to dull the edges of consciousness. But largely, the soldier was awake, lucid, experiencing every agonizing moment. The surgeon, wielding a formidable bone saw, would begin his work. The raw, grating sound of metal against bone, the tearing of muscle and sinew would fill the air. The patient's screams, muffled perhaps by a cloth or a leather strap clenched between their teeth, would echo across the makeshift infirmary, a chilling symphony of human agony. The swiftness of the surgeon's hand was crucial, for speed minimized both bleeding and suffering. Yet even the quickest cut was an ordeal of unimaginable pain. But the horror did not end with the severing of the limb. The greatest threat after amputation was uncontrollable bleeding. To staunch the inevitable, life-threatening hemorrhage, the Roman surgeons resorted to a terrifying method: cautery. Hot irons, often glowing a sinister cherry red, or sometimes boiling oils, were applied directly to the open stump, searing the flesh, coagulating the blood, and sealing the vessels. The sizzle of burning tissue, the rising smoke, with its sickening sweet scent. And the renewed, agonizing cries of the patient all bore witness to a procedure that was as much an act of torture as it was a desperate attempt at healing. The absence of germ theory meant that even successfully performed operations were often followed by agonizing infections. Pustules, pus, gangrene, these were daily realities. The instruments, used on one patient after another without proper sterilization, became vectors of disease. A soldier who survived the blade and the cautery might still succumb days later to a raging fever, his body consumed by sepsis, turning a triumph of surgery into a tragic, drawn-out demise. The stoicism demanded of Roman soldiers, even in the face of such savage intervention, speaks to a different understanding of pain and survival. A world where the body was pushed to its absolute limits. The battlefield surgeons of Rome were, in their own context, highly skilled. They developed techniques for wound care, treated fractures, and understood the importance of hygiene in preventing some illnesses, often building rudimentary hospitals or valetudinaria near their camps. Yet, their brilliance was shadowed by the sheer brutality of their interventions and the pervasive threat of infection. As the campfires dwindle to embers, casting long, dancing shadows, we are left with a grim portrait of ancient military medicine. The resilience of those who endured these procedures, often dying a slower, more agonizing death from complications, paints a stark and unforgiving picture. The chilling whisper of the saw against bone, the hiss of burning flesh, and the unspoken agony of countless Roman soldiers echo across the centuries. A testament to a time when survival on the battlefield, both in combat and under the surgeons' knife, demanded a strength that borders on the mythical, and a chilling reminder of the raw, brutal face of ancient healing. Asterisk when the heavens whispered of illness, and the very air seemed to thicken with malevolent forces. To what gruesome oracle did the Assyrians turn for a cure, believing they could read the secrets of the body in the steaming entrails of a sacrificed animal? Journey with me now to the ancient heartland of Assyria, a land of formidable warriors, monumental palaces, and a profound, often terrifying, reliance on divine will. Here, amidst the towering ziggurats and the colossal winged bull-human guardians, known as Lamassu, the fate of kings and commoners alike was often dictated not by human reason alone, but by celestial portents and the intimate, visceral examination of sacrificed animals. For the Assyrians, illness was rarely a random event. It was a sign, a message from the gods, a consequence of sin, or the insidious work of a demon. When disease struck, it wasn't enough to simply treat the symptoms. One had to understand the divine displeasure, to decipher the cosmic message embedded in the suffering. And for this, they turned to a specialized class of diviners, the Baru priests, who practiced a terrifying and complex art known as hepatoscopy, the reading of omens. From the liver of a freshly sacrificed sheep, picture the shadowed chambers of a temple, perhaps within the sprawling complex of Nineveh or Assur. The air is thick with the scent of burning herbs and the heavy, sweet odor of freshly spilled blood. A sheep, carefully chosen and ritually purified, is led forth. With solemn precision, its throat is cut, and its lifeblood pours forth, a sacred offering to the gods. Then, with an almost chilling reverence, the Baru priest, his hands perhaps stained with the animal's warmth, carefully extracts the liver, the organ believed to be the seat of life, emotion, and most importantly, divine communication. As the liver, still steaming from the animal's body, is laid upon a tablet, the true ritual begins. The Baru priest meticulously examines every aspect of the organ, its lobes, its ducts, its gallbladder, its coloration, its blemishes, its markings, its very shape. He holds it to the flickering torchlight, scrutinizing for any anomaly, any imperfection, any pattern that might reveal the will of the gods or the nature of the illness afflicting the patient. Clay models of perfect livers, meticulously inscribed with omens and interpretations, served as guides, helping the diviner to translate the visceral language of the sacrificed organ into a pronouncement of fate. Medical decisions, even the most rudimentary, were often guided by these gruesome interpretations. If the liver showed signs of specific markings, it might indicate a certain demon possessing the patient, or a particular god expressing anger. The prescribed cure might then involve a specific incantation, a particular ritual offering, or perhaps even a medicinal herb, but always rooted in the divine pronouncements gleaned from the animal's entrails. The lines between medicine, religion, and sacrifice were not merely blurred. They were inextricably interwoven. The chilling belief that one could glimpse the unseen forces of disease, that one could read the very blueprint of an illness within the steaming viscera of a freshly sacrificed animal, speaks to a profound desperation, and a world-view where health was a precarious balance between human suffering and divine displeasure. It was a world where rational observation, while present in nascent forms, was always secondary to the terrifying power of omen and prophecy. The priest-healers were not merely diagnosing a physical ailment, they were attempting to decipher a celestial message, to understand the spiritual roots of suffering. The practice of hepatoscopy, though ancient and seemingly barbaric, reveals a sophisticated, albeit misguided, system of belief. It was a desperate attempt to bring order to chaos, to find meaning in the arbitrary cruelty of disease. The Baru priest, with his blood-stained hands and his profound knowledge of celestial patterns and visceral signs, was the ultimate intermediary, standing between the suffering mortal and the inscrutable will of the gods, as the sacrificial smoke curls towards the heavens and the silent emptied carcass is removed. We are left with a haunting image, a civilization so deeply entwined with the divine that even the body's ailments were seen as celestial pronouncements. The unsettling whisper of those ancient rituals, the chilling precision with which a life was taken to glimpse the mysteries of another, echoes across the millennia. It reminds us of a time when the path to healing was often paved with sacrifice, and the most profound truths were sought not in the light of reason, but in the dark, pulsating secrets of an animal's heart, a stark testament to humanity's tireless quest for meaning in the face of pain, even if it meant looking into the very depths of a freshly spilled life. Did the revered father of medicine truly heal? Or did his profound wisdom, in its unintended consequences, lead to an endless cycle of purging and suffering for generations of the afflicted? Let us travel now to the sun-drenched isle of Kos, a jewel in the Aegean Sea, the very birthplace of Hippocrates, whose name echoes through the corridors of medical history. It was here, in the shimmering light of the 5th century BCE, that he and his followers laid the foundations of what would become Western medicine, striving to separate healing from the shackles of divine intervention and magical cures, seeking, instead, rational observation and empirical understanding. Hippocrates is celebrated for his eponymous Hippocratic Oath, a timeless ethical creed, and for his voluminous treatises, which meticulously documented symptoms, prognoses, and treatments. His brilliance lay in his emphasis on careful observation of the patient, the importance of diet, rest, and hygiene, and the belief in the body's innate capacity for healing vis medicatrix naturae, yet woven into the very fabric of his medical philosophy was a concept that, despite its revolutionary intent, would lead to centuries of profound discomfort and, at times, deadly interventions. The theory of the four humours, like the Babylonians before them, Hippocrates and his followers, believed the human body was composed of four fundamental fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each was associated with specific qualities: hot, cold, wet, dry, and their balance was paramount for health. An excess or deficiency of any humour was believed to cause illness. For instance, a fever might be an excess of blood, while melancholy was attributed to an excess of black bile. The logical extension of this theory, and its most pervasive consequence, was the relentless pursuit of their balance through purging, emetics, and bloodletting. Imagine a patient, perhaps a revered philosopher or a simple fisherman, lying upon a low couch in a quiet chamber on Kos, already weakened by a persistent fever or the ravages of a debilitating cough. The Hippocratic physician, calm and authoritative, would approach his diagnosis based on careful observation of symptoms. Pulse and bodily secretions would inevitably lead him back to the humoral theory. If there was an excess of phlegm, perhaps causing a cough, the patient would be subjected to powerful emetics, concoctions designed to induce violent vomiting, expelling the perceived excess from the body. The patient's stomach would heave, their body convulsing, their strength draining with each painful retch. If the ailment was deemed to be an excess of black bile, leading to melancholy or chronic digestive issues, then purgatives would be administered. These were often potent herbal laxatives designed to induce severe diarrhea, emptying the bowels repeatedly. The patient would endure waves of cramps, dehydration, and exhaustion, all in the name of expelling the bad humour. For an excess of blood, perhaps in cases of fever or inflammation, the dreaded bloodletting would be performed. A vein would be opened, and the crimson life force allowed to drain into a bowl. The patient growing paler, weaker, their vision blurring. The very act of losing blood, which we now know to be vital, was seen as a necessary cleansing, a removal of the offending substance. The well-intentioned but often destructive interventions, based on a flawed understanding of physiology, reveal a medical philosophy where the cure often mirrored the disease in its severity. The patient's agony during these treatments was often misinterpreted as the expulsion of the disease itself, a sign that the remedy was working. Weakness was seen as the body shedding its burdens, not as a dangerous depletion of vital resources. The constant purging and bleeding often led to further dehydration, malnutrition, and a weakened immune system, leaving the patient even more vulnerable to secondary infections or a worsening of their original ailment. The endurance of Hippocratic humoral theory, its tenets taught and practiced for well over 1,000 years across the ancient and medieval worlds, forces us to confront the enduring power of intellectual legacy, even when its practical applications inflicted considerable suffering. Generations of healers, armed with this celebrated wisdom, continued to administer these aggressive treatments, firm in their belief that they were restoring balance, when in fact they were often pushing the human body to its very limits. As the fading light casts long shadows across the ancient texts that bear Hippocrates' name, we are left to ponder the profound irony of his legacy. His quest for a rational, observational medicine was monumental, yet it birthed a system that, while freeing the body from the whims of gods, subjected it to a different kind of torment. The unseen agony of countless patients enduring the relentless purgative torment, the agonizing emetics, and the debilitating bloodletting remains a silent, chilling testament to the true cost of their celebrated wisdom that, in its pursuit of balance, often led to profound imbalance, and in its quest for healing, often inflicted unspeakable pain. In the dense, emerald jungles and bustling, vibrant cities of ancient India, where the whispers of the Vedas intertwined with the vibrant tapestry of daily life, how did they close wounds with such a bizarre, yet ingenious, living thread? How did they stitch together torn flesh with a method so visceral, so primal, that it evokes a shudder of both revulsion and reluctant admiration? Let us delve into the rich, spiritual, and surprisingly sophisticated medical landscape of ancient India, a civilization that, millennia ago, pioneered surgical techniques that would not be rediscovered in the West for centuries. Our journey takes us to the time of Sushruta, a legendary physician and surgeon whose work, the Sushruta, dates back to perhaps the 6th century BCE. This monumental treatise, one of the earliest and most comprehensive texts on surgery in human history, details over 300 surgical procedures, 120 surgical instruments, and hundreds of diseases. It speaks of a profound understanding of anatomy, surgical hygiene, and the art of the healing touch. Yet, nestled within its wisdom lies a fascinating and gruesome method for suturing wounds. A technique born of sheer necessity and an intimate knowledge of the natural world, using the heads of large black ants. Imagine the scene, a battlefield. Wound, perhaps a deep gash from a sword or an arrow, gaping and raw, bleeding profusely. Or perhaps a less dramatic, but still debilitating, injury in a village. In a world without sterile threads, without refined needles or the knowledge of modern suture materials, the challenge of closing a wound effectively was immense. Infection was a constant, terrifying threat, and a gaping wound was an open invitation to corruption and death. The Sushruta Samhita describes a solution both ingenious and unsettling. Picture the skilled surgeon, his movements precise and deliberate, approaching the wound. He would take a handful of large, aggressive black ants, their mandibles powerful and capable of a tenacious grip. Then, with careful precision, he would place the ant directly onto the edges of the incision, holding the two sides of the wound together. The ant, in its defensive instinct, would immediately clamp its powerful mandibles, its natural pincers cross the opposing edges of the flesh, effectively pulling them together. Then, with a swift, decisive motion, the surgeon would twist off the body of the ant, leaving its head firmly in place, its mandibles acting as a natural, living clamp, holding the wound closed. One by one, more ants would be applied along the length of the incision, their severed heads creating a line of tiny, organic staples. The patient, enduring this bizarre and agonizing procedure, would have felt the sharp pinch of each ant, the tearing of its body, and the subsequent unsettling sensation of its decapitated head gripping their flesh. There was no pain relief beyond herbal decoctions, or perhaps the sheer stoicism demanded by the dire circumstances. While undeniably visceral and gruesome, this technique was remarkably effective for its time. The chitinous mandibles of the ants provided a strong, natural, and relatively sterile way to approximate the wound edges, allowing the body's own healing processes to begin. When the wound had sufficiently knitted, the ant heads would either fall off naturally or could be carefully removed. It speaks to a profound observational skill, a deep understanding of animal behavior, and an innovative spirit born of necessity. The irony, of course, is that while it prevented the wound from gaping open, the risk of infection from the antheads themselves, or from the unsanitary conditions, remained a constant peril. The Sushruta Samhita describes not only this unique suturing method but also techniques for rhinoplasty nose reconstruction, cataract surgery, and the setting of fractures, all using an array of sophisticated instruments. It highlights a medical tradition that was both empirically driven and deeply integrated with the natural world, even its more unsettling aspects, as we withdraw from the ancient operating theatre, where life met the living blade of the ant. We are left with a chilling whisper of ingenuity and visceral practicality. The faint sensation of a living creature's grip sealing one's own flesh. The desperate hope for healing in the face of agonizing necessity. These echoes resonate from a time when the boundaries of medicine were drawn by the raw realities of survival. The ant's grip, a testament to ancient Indian wisdom, remains a haunting reminder of the bizarre and brutal beauty of healing in a world illuminated only by the flicker of human ingenuity and the enduring tenacity of life itself. Did the grandeur of Roman engineering, those colossal arches and intricate networks of channels that brought the life-giving flow of water to their magnificent cities, unwittingly usher in a creeping, insidious death for generations of their citizens. Let us walk now through the impressive, silent ruins of the Roman Empire, their aqueducts standing as monumental testaments to their unparalleled engineering prowess. These conduits, stretching for miles across sun-drenched landscapes, were designed to bring fresh, clean water from distant springs and rivers to the bustling heart of Rome and its sprawling provinces, a feat of logistics and construction that remains awe-inspiring even today. Yet, within this marvel of infrastructure, this testament to human ingenuity and power, lay a silent, insidious killer. The Romans, with their advanced understanding of metallurgy and their practical approach to construction, extensively used lead for plumbing. They crafted pipes, lined cisterns, and even fashioned cooking utensils from this seemingly versatile and durable metal. They used lead acetate, known as sapa, as a sweetener for their wine, believing it enhanced flavor and preservation. They knew lead was toxic in its raw elemental form, yet they seemed to overlook the chronic, cumulative dangers of its widespread use in daily life, perhaps prioritizing convenience and durability over unseen health risks. Imagine the daily ritual, the Roman citizen drawing water from a public fountain, water that had traveled through miles of lead pipes. Envision the family preparing their meals, cooking in lead-lined bronze pots, or serving wine sweetened with lead syrup from lead-glazed pottery. With every sip, every bite, microscopic particles of lead were unknowingly ingested, accumulating slowly, relentlessly, within their bodies. This was not a sudden, dramatic poison, but a slow, insidious siege, an invisible enemy creeping through the very veins of their society. The symptoms of chronic lead poisoning are insidious and wide-ranging, often mimicking other ailments or simply being attributed to the mysterious ravages of age, fate, or divine displeasure. We can imagine the Roman citizens suffering from unexplained illnesses, crippling abdominal pain, often mistaken for indigestion or colic, chronic fatigue and weakness that drained their vitality, neurological damage manifesting as tremors, numbness, or even a creeping paralysis that stole their ability to move. The mental and behavioral effects were perhaps even more terrifying. Irritability, profound melancholia, cognitive decline, memory loss, and in severe cases, outright madness, driving individuals to irrational outbursts or deep despair. Reproductive issues were also common, with lead contributing to infertility, miscarriages, and stillbirths among both men and women, subtly undermining the very continuity of their families. The irony, of course, is profoundly tragic. The same engineering marvels that symbolized Roman advancement and provided them with an unprecedented quality of life, their running water, their heated baths, their sweetened wines, were simultaneously poisoning them from within. The knowledge of lead's toxicity was not entirely absent. Physicians like Dioscorides noted its harmful effects, but the scale of its use, its integration into almost every aspect of daily life, and the insidious nature of chronic poisoning meant that its true, pervasive impact remained largely unrecognized or underestimated. The wealthy elite, who used more lead in their elaborate homes and enjoyed more lead-sweetened wine, were arguably at even greater risk, adding a chilling layer of aristocratic suffering to the silent epidemic. The theory has even been proposed that widespread lead poisoning contributed to the eventual decline of the Roman Empire, citing instances of mental instability among emperors and a general weakening of the population. While this remains a complex historical debate with many contributing factors, the sheer prevalence of lead in their daily lives certainly casts a dark shadow over their brilliant legacy. The grandeur of their cities, built with such meticulous care, unknowingly housed a pervasive, invisible threat. As the sun sets over the silent arches of the Roman aqueducts, casting long, mournful shadows across the landscape, we are left with a haunting reflection. The magnificent achievements of Rome, its very embrace of luxury and convenience, contained the seeds of a slow, self-inflicted demise, the unseen suffering of countless citizens, unknowingly ingesting the silent poison through the very water that sustained them, remains a poignant testament to the blind spots of even the most advanced civilizations. The chilling whisper of lead's slow poison echoes from the very heart of their imperial glory, a tragic reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers are hidden within the most celebrated triumphs. Did the intricate dance of 1,000 needles truly restore cosmic balance, or was it a painful, esoteric gamble against unseen forces, a delicate yet terrifying interplay of life and suffering? Journey with me now to the ancient dynasties of China, a vast land of profound philosophy, intricate cosmology, and a medical system deeply intertwined with the very fabric of the universe. Here, where the principles of yin and yang governed all existence, and the invisible flow of vital energy, or qi, dictated health and harmony, the practice of acupuncture emerged, a complex art of piercing the body at specific points with fine needles. For millennia, Chinese medicine developed a unique understanding of the human body, not as a mere collection of organs, but as a miniature cosmos, a landscape through which qi flowed along invisible pathways called meridians. When this flow was blocked, stagnant, or imbalanced, illness would manifest. The challenge for the ancient Chinese physician was not simply to alleviate symptoms, but to restore the harmonious flow of qi, to bring the body back into alignment with the cosmic order. Envision a dimly lit chamber, perhaps within a tranquil temple or a scholar's quiet home, the air thick with the subtle sense of herbal infusions and perhaps a wisp of burning incense. A patient, their face etched with the lines of chronic pain or the pallor of persistent illness, lie still, their body exposed. The practitioner, often a revered scholar physician, approaches with an almost meditative focus, his movements deliberate, his hands practiced. He would consult intricate charts depicting the labyrinthine network of meridians, identifying the specific acupoints that needed to be stimulated. Then, with an almost terrifying precision, the needles would emerge. Fine, hair-thin instruments, often made of gold, silver, or bronze, would be meticulously inserted into the patient's flesh. Not just one or two, but sometimes dozens, even hundreds of needles, each one a tiny, shimmering spear, piercing the skin at specific depths and angles. The sensation for the patient would vary: a dull ache, a slight prick, a tingling, or a subtle rush of energy. But with so many needles, the overall experience could be one of profound discomfort, a deliberate assault on the senses in the name of restoration. The ancient understanding of acupuncture was steeped in theories of energetic meridians, the interplay of internal organs, and the cosmic balance of opposing forces. It was a profound mystery to the uninitiated, a system seemingly divorced from the Western concept of anatomy. The sheer number of needles, the precise placement on these invisible pathways, and the subjective nature of pain relief make us wonder about the profound psychological power at play, the delicate boundary between healing and deliberate discomfort. Was it the needles themselves that healed, or the profound belief in their power? While modern science has since explored acupuncture, finding some efficacy for specific conditions like pain management, the ancient rationale was far more mystical and holistic. The physician was not merely addressing a symptom, he was attempting to retune the body's energetic symphony, to open blocked channels, to disperse stagnant ki, to coax the vital force back into harmonious flow. The patient, undergoing this intricate ritual, was participating in a deeply spiritual act of healing, placing their trust in a system that viewed their body as a miniature universe, intimately connected to the great cosmic energies. The silence in the chamber would be profound, broken only by the practitioner's quiet breathing, perhaps the soft rustle of their robes, and the almost imperceptible tremor of the needles as they were gently manipulated. The patient, lying still, would engage in an act of deep introspection, focusing on the sensations within, willing the healing energies to flow. For many, relief did come, a testament to the powerful connection between mind and body, and perhaps to the genuine, albeit unquantified, therapeutic effects of the procedure. As we withdraw from the ancient Chinese chamber, leaving behind the patient with their 1,000 needles, we are left with a haunting reflection. It is a reflection on a profound philosophical and medical system, a testament to humanity's diverse paths in seeking relief from suffering. The chilling whisper of the needle's edge, the quiet tension of a body pierced in the name of balance, echoes from a time when healing was an intricate dance with the unseen forces of the cosmos, leaving us to ponder the enduring power of ancient wisdom and the delicate, painful boundary between human ailment and cosmic harmony. What hidden torments did women endure in antiquity, their remedies often as horrifying as their ailments, their suffering relegated to the quiet, private chambers of their homes? Let us delve into the often unspoken, profoundly intimate, and frequently brutal world of women's health in Greco-Roman antiquity. It was a world where understanding of the female body was rudimentary, often shrouded in mystery and misconception, and inextricably intertwined with superstition, moral judgment, and the limitations of medical knowledge. In a society where women's bodies were seen primarily through the lens of reproduction and domesticity, and where open discussion of female ailments was considered indelicate, Their suffering was often borne in silence or entrusted to the hands of midwives and healers, who operated with limited tools and even more limited understanding. Here, pressurized devices or concoctions inserted into the vagina were a common and versatile, yet often terrifying, intervention used for a myriad of gynecological issues, as well as for contraception or to induce abortion. Imagine a woman, perhaps a noblewoman in a Roman villa or a humble woman in a Greek city, suffering from a uterine prolapse, a deeply uncomfortable and debilitating condition where the uterus descends into the vaginal canal, or perhaps she desperately sought to prevent another pregnancy or, tragically, to terminate one. The remedies offered to her, recorded in texts like Hippocrates' gynecological treatises or the writings of Cyrannus of Ephesus, can only be described as profoundly disturbing. Picture the substances employed: crocodile dung, mixed perhaps with honey or other binding agents, fashioned into a suppository for contraception. The sheer revulsion, the inherent unsanitary nature of such a material, inserted directly into a sensitive mucosal area, is almost unimaginable. Other concoctions included sour milk, lead compounds, caustic salts, or even less savory animal products like rendered fat or bizarre mixtures of crushed insects. These were often combined with powerful, irritating herbs, all aimed at treating inflammation, preventing conception, or inducing a miscarriage. The application itself, often performed by the woman herself or a midwife, would have been deeply uncomfortable, invasive, and undignified. But the agony did not end there. The sheer discomfort from such caustic, irritating, and unhygienic materials would have been immense. Burning, itching, inflammation, and vaginal discharge would have been common side effects. More dangerously, the use of lead compounds could lead to chronic poisoning, silently infiltrating the woman's system. The risk of severe infections, ascending into the uterus and beyond, leading to infertility, chronic pain, or even death from sepsis, was ever present in a world without antibiotics or understanding of germ theory. The silent suffering endured by countless women, subjected to these invasive and often dangerous interventions, reveals a desperate struggle against ailments poorly understood, a constant battle against their own bodies in a world that offered few gentle solutions. The very mystery surrounding female anatomy contributed to the often barbaric nature of these treatments. The uterus was often viewed as a wandering womb, believed to move about the body, causing various ailments if not kept in check. This erroneous belief led to treatments that were as much about psychological placation as physical healing. The lack of open discussion, the societal pressures, and the limited agency of women in these patriarchal societies meant that their pain was often internalized, their suffering a private burden, as the flickering lamplight casts long shadows across the private chambers of Antiquity. We are left with a haunting legacy of unseen agony, the whispers of despair, the silent tears, and the profound discomfort endured by generations of women, forced to confront remedies as horrifying as their ailments, echo from a time when their bodies were a realm of profound mystery and often cruel intervention. The Greco-Roman pessaries, these desperate artifacts of ancient female health, remain a chilling testament to the lengths to which women were forced to go, and the silent suffering they bore in a world that offered little comfort or true understanding. When the creeping tendrils of infection began their relentless siege, gnawing at flesh and bone, what fiery agony awaited the medieval patient on the crude surgeon's table, and what desperate measure promised a slim chance of survival. Step into the grim, unyielding reality of a medieval surgical chamber, a place often found in a bustling town, a secluded monastery, or even within the cold stone walls of a castle. The air here was not clean. It was thick with the stench of unwashed bodies, stale blood, and the pervasive fear of pain. In a time before antiseptics, before effective pain relief, and with a rudimentary understanding of disease, a simple wound could quickly become a death sentence. A cut on the hand could lead to a festering infection that spread up the arm, turning healthy tissue into gangrenous blackness. A shattered leg from a fall or a battle might rapidly become a source of profound corruption. In such dire circumstances, amputation was not a choice. It was a brutal, desperate necessity, often the only recourse against the creeping, inevitable advance of death. Imagine the scene: a patient, perhaps a knight brought back from a skirmish, his limbs swollen and discolored, or a peasant whose arm had been crushed in an accident. They lie upon a rough wooden table, often held down by strong assistants, their faces pale, etched with terror. There was no true anesthesia. Perhaps a gulp of strong ale or wine, or a swift blow to the head intended to induce unconsciousness. But largely, the patient was lucid, experiencing every agonizing moment. The medieval surgeon, often a barber surgeon, a man more skilled with a razor than a precise scalpel, would prepare his instruments: formidable bone saws, sharp, heavy knives, and perhaps, most terrifying of all, the cautery iron. With a grim determination, the surgeon would begin his work. The knife would bite deep, severing muscle and sinew, the raw pain a wave that would make the patient scream, their cries echoing through the chamber. Then the bone saw would come into play, its teeth gnawing through the dense bone, the grating sound of metal against bone, the tearing, ripping sensation. The gush of blood all were part of a harrowing symphony of agony. The speed of the surgeon's hand was crucial, for a quicker cut meant less suffering and less blood loss. Yet, even in its swiftness, it was an ordeal of unimaginable torment. But the horror did not end with the severing of the limb. The greatest, most immediate threat after amputation was uncontrollable hemorrhage. Blood loss could lead to death faster than infection. To staunch the inevitable, life-threatening flow, medieval surgeons resorted to a terrifying ancient method: cauterization. Picture the surgeon's assistant holding a heavy iron rod in a roaring fire until its tip glowed a menacing, angry cherry red. Then, with a chilling deliberation, the surgeon would apply this searing hot iron directly to the open stump, pressing it against the severed arteries and veins. The immediate reaction would be a searing, agonizing scream from the patient, a primal cry of pain as the burning flesh sizzled and hissed. Smoke would rise, carrying the sickening sweet scent of charred tissue, filling the air and the nostrils of all present. The cautery would seal the blood vessels, stopping the bleeding, but at an immense cost in pain and trauma, sometimes boiling. Oil or tar would be poured onto the stump as an alternative. Equally agonizing form of cauterization, the aftermath was often as brutal as the procedure itself. Without understanding of germ theory, the wounds, cauterized or not, were highly susceptible to infection. The very instruments used on one patient after another without sterilization became vectors of disease. Many who survived the initial agony succumbed days or weeks later to raging fevers, their bodies consumed by sepsis, their triumph of survival turning into a slow, agonizing demise. The stoicism demanded of individuals in this era, the profound belief in enduring hardship as a path to salvation, was often the only armor against such savage interventions. as the flickering candlelight casts long, dancing shadows across the grim reality of the medieval surgical chamber, and the faint, unsettling scent of burning flesh still seems to linger. We are left with a grim portrait of medicine in its rawest, most brutal form. The screams, the smoke, the desperate prayers, and the profound human capacity for endurance all bear witness to a medical era where survival often came at an unbearable cost, and the burning iron was as much a tool of suffering as it was a desperate instrument of healing. The scars, both physical and psychological, bore silent witness to a time when life hung by a thread, and death was often held at bay only by unimaginable pain. What unholy tools did they wield, forged of iron and desperation, to silence the torment of a relentlessly gnawing tooth? And how did anyone, in a world devoid of true solace, truly survive such an ordeal? Cringe with me now at the very thought of ancient dentistry, where the relentless throb of a toothache, a common affliction spanning all strata of society, often led to desperate, brutal measures. Let us travel across the vast expanse of time, from the sun-baked lands of the Egyptian pharaohs, whose very mummies show evidence of severe dental abscesses, to the bustling, often unsanitary streets of ancient Rome, where the local barber might double as a tooth extractor. The causes of dental pain were, in essence, no different than today: decay, infection, impacted wisdom teeth, gum disease. But the understanding of these causes and the means to alleviate them were profoundly different, steeped in superstition, crude empiricism, and a horrifying lack of pain relief. A persistent toothache could drive a person to the brink of madness, disrupting sleep, making eating impossible, and turning every moment into a symphony of torment. Imagine a patient, their face swollen, their eye perhaps bruised from days of unrelenting pain, driven to the edge of endurance. They might be held down by strong arms, their head gripped firmly, as the practitioner, be it a specialized dentist in more advanced societies like Egypt, or a blacksmith, a barber, or simply a strongman in others, approached with his implements. These were not the delicate tools of modern dentistry. These were instruments of brute force, crude, heavy pliers forged from bronze or iron, their jaws often blunt, sometimes even a hammer and chisel wielded with terrifying intent. The goal was simple, yet horrific: to remove the offending tooth. There was no effective anesthesia, beyond perhaps a swig of strong wine or a poultice of opium if available. The patient would be fully conscious, experiencing the agonizing, wrenching, and tearing as the tooth was forced from its socket. The bone might splinter, the surrounding gums would bleed profusely, and the screams of the patient would fill the air, a raw, primal expression of absolute agony. The tearing sound, the sickening pop as the tooth yielded, followed by the metallic taste of blood, would be a memory etched deep into the survivor's mind. Archaeological records are replete with evidence of such violent extractions. Skulls unearthed from ancient burial sites often bear silent witness to these brutal procedures, gaping holes where teeth once were, sometimes surrounded by shattered jawbones, clear signs of massive trauma, or evidence of persistent, unhealed infections that would have festered long after the extraction, ultimately leading to death from sepsis. The sheer resilience of those who endured and survived these procedures is a testament to the profound human capacity for suffering, even beyond extraction. Other remedies were equally disturbing. Ancient texts describe poultices made of strange ingredients, often including animal excrement, urine, or caustic herbs. applied directly to the painful tooth or gum, with the hope of driving out the worm or demon believed to be causing the decay. These would have caused severe irritation, burns, and further infection, adding layers of torment to the original affliction. The profound agony endured for something as common as a toothache speaks volumes about the primitive and often horrific nature of ancient dental care. It highlights a time when the very act of healing was often indistinguishable from an act of torture, where desperation drove both practitioner and patient to endure practices that defy modern comprehension. The grim choice between relentless pain and the terrifying, often deadly, intervention of extraction was a daily reality for millions, as the echoes of those ancient screams fade into the silence, and we contemplate the gnawing pain that tormented countless lives. We are left with a chilling reflection. The crude tools, the terrifying methods, and the profound suffering endured in the pursuit of relief from a simple toothache, all paint a stark and unsettling portrait of ancient dentistry. It is a haunting reminder of a time when the sweet release from pain often came only after enduring an agony far worse, etched forever into the bone and the very fabric of human memory. Amidst the cacophony of the Roman battlefield, where the clash of steel and the cries of the wounded created a grim symphony of death, what delicate yet terrifying innovation offered a fragile thread of hope against bleeding out, a silent gamble against the swift embrace of oblivion. Let us return to the vast, blood-soaked landscape of the Roman Empire, a realm forged in conflict and sustained by the resilience of its legions. Here, where life could be extinguished in a breath, the challenge of stemming the tide of life, itself the ceaseless flow of blood, was paramount. Our guide through this harrowing medical landscape is Aulus Cornelius Celsus, a Roman of the 1st century AD, though he was likely not a practicing physician or surgeon himself. His monumental 8-book treatise, De Medicina, meticulously documented medical practices of his time, preserving a wealth of knowledge from both Greek and Roman traditions. It is within his comprehensive work that we find descriptions of a seemingly simple yet profoundly revolutionary concept: the use of ligatures for blood vessels before Celsus, and indeed for centuries after him, the primary method for controlling severe bleeding from severed arteries and veins was cautery, the application of searing hot irons or boiling oils. As we have seen, this was effective in stopping the flow, but at immense cost in terms of pain, tissue damage, and the constant threat of infection. Celsus, drawing on earlier Greek practices, articulated a different, more refined approach to tie off the bleeding vessel with a thread. Imagine a wounded soldier, perhaps a centurion with a deep arterial wound to the thigh, bleeding profusely, his life rapidly draining away onto the dusty ground. The surgeon, guided by Celsus's principles, would approach with careful precision. He would use fine forceps to grasp the end of the severed blood vessel, carefully pulling it forth from the surrounding tissue. Then, with a steady hand, he would thread a thin linen or catgut ligature around the vessel and tie it off, effectively sealing it and stopping the flow of blood. While a significant advancement over the brutal agony of cautery, the procedure was still performed without the benefit of true pain relief. The patient, often conscious, would experience the sharp pinch of the forceps, the agonizing sensation of the vessel being manipulated, and the delicate but firm pressure of the thread as it tightened. The fear of bleeding to death would have been replaced by the immediate, raw pain of the intervention itself, a new kind of torment. Furthermore, the environment was anything but sterile. The air of the battlefield or the makeshift infirmary was rife with dust, dirt, and unseen contagions. The ligatures themselves, whether linen or animal gut, were not sterilized. The surgeon's hands, though perhaps washed, were not germ-free. Thus, even a perfectly executed ligature, stopping the immediate hemorrhage, often became a conduit for infection. The wound, carefully tied off, would fester. Pus would form, fevers would spike, and the patient who had been saved from immediate death by blood loss might succumb days or weeks later to sepsis, a systemic infection that would consume the body from within. This slower, more agonizing death was often mistaken for a secondary complication, a cruel twist of fate, rather than the consequence of unseen pathogens. The Celsus ligature, therefore, represented a profound step forward in surgical technique, demonstrating an intellectual leap in understanding blood flow and its control. It was an innovation that offered a tangible, fragile hope, where once there had been only despair. Yet, this hope was always overshadowed by the looming spectre of septicemia, a silent, invisible killer that often claimed lives even after the surgeon's most skillful interventions. As the flickering torchlight casts long, dancing shadows across the grim reality of the Roman battlefield and its medical practices, we are left with a chilling reflection. The delicate thread of the ligature, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of suffering, also carried with it the unspoken fear of an unseen foe. It is a haunting reminder that even the most brilliant medical advancements in the ancient world were often a desperate gamble, where the very act of saving a life could inadvertently pave the way for a slower, more insidious demise, a silent whisper of unseen agony that echoed across the centuries. When the medieval physician peered, with an air of profound wisdom, into the golden stream, what bizarre truths did he claim to behold? And what elaborate deception did he weave from the simple flow of human waste? Step now into the dimly lit, often pungent chambers of a medieval European physician, a man of learning, perhaps, but one whose diagnostic tools were starkly limited and often steeped in ancient, flawed theories. Here, in a world grappling with rampant disease and limited scientific understanding, diagnosis often began not with a careful examination of the patient's ailing body, but with a meticulous, almost ritualistic, inspection of their urine. Uroscopy, or urine gazing, was not merely a supplemental diagnostic tool. It was a cornerstone of medieval medicine, a practice that stretched back to ancient Greek and Roman traditions, and became elevated to an almost mystical art during the Middle Ages. It was believed that the urine, being a filtered product of the entire body, contained vital information about the patient's internal state. The balance of their elusive humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, and even the nature of their illness. Imagine the physician, often clad in scholarly robes, his brow furrowed in concentration. Before him stands a clear glass flask, known as a matula, containing the patient's urine. He would hold it to the faint light of a window or a flickering candle, scrutinizing its every nuance. He would observe its color, from pale straw to deep amber, reddish hues to murky browns. He would note its clarity, whether it was transparent or clouded with sediment. He would look for floating particles, precipitate, or even bizarrely, clouds or prophecies believed to indicate the presence of disease. Beyond sight, he might even test its smell and, perhaps most disturbingly, its taste, a sweet taste indicating diabetes, for instance. Elaborate charts, known as urine wheels, were commonplace, meticulously detailing how various shades and corresponded to specific ailments, humoral imbalances, or even predictions about the course of a disease. A dark, murky urine might indicate an excess of black bile and melancholia. A pale, watery sample, an excess of phlegm. Physicians would often use these charts as a theatrical prop, lending an air of scientific authority to what was largely a speculative practice. The charade, often performed with an air of profound wisdom and gravitas, speaks to a desperate search for answers in an era of limited objective understanding. In a world where internal examinations were rare and diagnostic, tests non-existent, the urine offered a tangible, albeit misleading, window into the unseen workings of the body. Patients, desperate for a cure, would place immense faith in the physician's pronouncements derived from this mysterious observation. The tragic consequence, of course, was that this reliance on uroscopy often led to wildly inaccurate and dangerous diagnoses. A clear urine, for example, might be dismissed as healthy while a severe internal infection raged within the patient. A dark urine might lead to aggressive, debilitating purges based on a false humoral diagnosis, further weakening an already suffering individual. Patients were vulnerable to the pronouncements of those who claimed to read the body's hidden secrets in a simple golden fluid, often to their detriment. The practice was so prevalent that even itinerant quacks and charlatans would carry a flask of colored water, pretending to diagnose passers-by based on their urine, highlighting the widespread belief and susceptibility to such deception. The very visual nature of the urine, its changing appearance, seemed to offer a concrete sign in a world hungry for certainty. As the flickering candle dims in the medieval chamber, and the faint, unsettling scent of an ancient deception still seems to linger, we are left with a haunting reflection. The medieval urine, gazing, with its elaborate charts and solemn rituals, was a desperate, misguided attempt to understand the complexities of the human body through a single, unreliable lens. It is a chilling reminder of a time when the path to healing was often paved with the very fluid of life, and the pronouncements of the healer were often a profound deception, leaving patients exposed to the arbitrary judgments of a golden stream and the silent suffering of misdiagnosis. Did the ancient healers truly believe that a physical hole, carved into the very seat of consciousness, could banish the terrifying demons of the mind, or release the tormented spirit trapped within its confines? Let us return, if we dare, to the primal, shadowed landscapes of the ancient world, a time when mental illness was not seen as a medical condition, a complex interplay of brain chemistry and psychological distress, but as something far more terrifying. The intrusion of malevolent spirits, the insidious touch of divine displeasure, or a profound imbalance wrought by unseen forces. In such a terrifying landscape, where reason failed and understanding crumbled, the ancient practice of trepannation, drilling or scraping of a hole in the skull, was employed not merely for physical injury, like a fractured cranium, but as a desperate, brutal measure to cure madness, epilepsy, or chronic, unbearable headaches. Imagine a person afflicted by violent seizures, their body convulsing, their eyes rolling back, their mouth frothing, or perhaps a soul lost to the abyss of psychosis, screaming at unseen tormentors, consumed by delusions, their connection to reality severed. Picture the scene: the afflicted individual, perhaps bound, their fear palpable, lies exposed under the watchful, solemn gaze of the shaman or healer. The air is thick with tension, with desperation, and with the faint, unsettling scent of ritual. The primitive instruments, crafted from sharpened flint, obsidian, or bone, are brought forth crude, yet capable of terrifying precision. With meticulous, rhythmic scraping or drilling, the practitioner would begin to penetrate the skull, aiming to create an opening, a literal portal. The pain would be unimaginable, raw and unyielding, as the bone was slowly, agonizingly breached. The patient, unless utterly incapacitated by their illness or drugged into a stupor, would experience every harrowing sensation, every agonizing sound of grinding bone. The grim purpose behind this ordeal was deeply rooted in ancient belief systems. It was thought that by creating an aperture in the skull, the malevolent spirits or evil humors causing the madness could be released, literally expelled from the confined space of the cranium, allowing the tormented soul to find peace, or the afflicted mind to return to sanity. The archaeological record is replete with chilling evidence of this practice. Skulls unearthed from ancient burial sites across continents, from prehistoric Europe and South America to the ancient Middle East, bear the silent, circular, or irregular scars of trepannation. Some of these skulls show clear signs of healing, indicating that the individual survived the immediate, terrifying ordeal of the surgery. What became of them? Did the madness lift? Did the seizures cease? Or did they simply survive the immediate trauma, only to live with the profound physical mark of their desperate cure, perhaps more susceptible to infection, their inner turmoil unresolved? The overwhelming probability of infection, of irreversible brain damage, of a swift and agonizing death was ever present. The lack of antiseptic practices meant that even if the patient survived the initial incision, a festering infection could easily set in, leading to meningitis, brain abscesses, and a far more agonizing demise. Yet, in a world where mental illness was so profoundly misunderstood, seen as a curse rather than a condition, this brutal intervention was likely viewed as a compassionate, albeit desperate, attempt to free the tormented soul. The silent, empty gaze of the trepanned skull, a relic from the dawn of human suffering, whispers of a profound human desire for liberation from an inner torment, a void carved into the very seat of consciousness. It is a testament to the terrifying intersection of spiritual belief, nascent medical practice, and the overwhelming fear of the unknown, as the flickering shadows dance around the ancient bone. We are left to ponder the chilling legacy of ancient trepannation for mental illness. It is a haunting reminder of a time when the mind's deepest mysteries were met with the crude simplicity of a cutting tool, when hope was found in the very act of breaching the sacred boundary of the skull. The whispers they sought to silence were they truly banished through that opened void, or did they simply echo louder in the empty space left behind? A chilling testament to humanity's desperate gamble with the very core of its being. When the body felt heavy with ill humors, when unseen forces caused the flesh to ache and swell, what fiery glass brought dark, circular relief, pulling ailments from the very surface of the skin? Let us witness now a widespread Roman practice, a therapy steeped in ancient beliefs and designed to draw out bad humors, stagnant blood, or invisible toxins from the afflicted body. Cupping. It was a common sight, from the lavish bathhouses of the wealthy to the simple homes of the common folk. A therapeutic ritual performed with an air of solemn purpose. The origins of cupping stretch back millennia, across various ancient cultures, but the Romans adopted and refined it, integrating it into their comprehensive medical system, often influenced by the humoral theories of Hippocrates and Galen. The underlying belief was that disease was caused by an imbalance or excess of bodily fluids, and by creating a vacuum on the skin, these offending substances could be drawn to the surface and extracted. Imagine a patient, perhaps suffering from muscular pain, a persistent cold, or simply feeling sluggish and unbalanced. The practitioner physician, a bath attendant, or even a skilled family member would prepare the cupping apparatus. This typically involved a small, bell-shaped glass or horn cup. The key was to create a vacuum within the cup. This was often achieved by briefly holding a flame from a small piece of burning flax or cotton inside the cup, heating the air within it. Then, with a swift, decisive motion, the heated cup would be rapidly placed onto the patient's skin, often on their back, chest, or other affected areas. As the heated air inside the cup cooled, it would contract, creating a powerful suction. The skin and underlying tissue would be forcibly drawn upwards into the cup, forming a raised, often purple or red welt. The sensation for the patient would be one of strong pulling, an intense pressure, sometimes accompanied by a localized warmth. For many, this sensation, though uncomfortable, would be interpreted as the direct action of the bad humors being drawn out, a visible sign that the treatment was working. The cups would remain in place for several minutes, sometimes longer, leaving behind dark, circular bruises, often purplish or reddish, where the suction had been applied. These marks, resembling ominous bruises, were often seen as tangible proof of the efficacy of the treatment, a visual testament to the removal of disease from within. Sometimes wet cupping was performed, where small incisions were made on the skin before applying the cup, allowing blood to be drawn out, a more aggressive form of bloodletting. While variations of cupping exist today and are sometimes used for muscle relaxation or to promote blood flow, the ancient rationale was rooted in a profound misunderstanding of physiology. There was no scientific basis for bad humors being drawn out through the skin. Yet, the observable effects, the bruising, the localized swelling, the temporary relief of tension were often mistaken for genuine cures. The psychological impact of the ritual, the active participation in a visible healing process, also played a significant role, offering comfort and a sense of agency in the face of illness. The marks left by the cupping glasses, like silent accusations or grim accolades, bore witness to a desperation for relief etched onto the very flesh. They were a testament to a time when visible effects, however superficial, were often misinterpreted as profound healing, and the body's temporary bruising was seen as the mark of impending recovery. As the echoes of those ancient treatments fade into the silence, and we contemplate the bruised hope that lingered in Roman bathhouses and healing chambers, we are left with a haunting reflection. The Roman practice of cupping, a therapy born of flawed theory yet embraced with unwavering belief, reminds us of humanity's ceaseless quest to alleviate suffering. It is a chilling whisper from a time when the path to healing was often a visibly painful one, where the very act of scarring the body was believed to cleanse the soul, leaving behind only the dark, circular imprints of a forgotten struggle against unseen ailments. What ancient blade, honed from flint or bronze, first etched the lines of tradition and sanctity onto the flesh, in a world where ritual was not merely practice, but also profoundly intertwined with the very fabric of medicine and identity. Journey with me now to the sun-drenched lands of ancient Egypt, a civilization whose meticulous records and enduring monuments reveal a deep reverence for custom, cleanliness, and the body's preparation for both earthly life and the eternal afterlife. Here, amidst the grandeur of temples and the bustling rhythm of the Nile, circumcision was a widespread practice, not solely for hygiene or health, but as a significant religious, social, and rite of passage ritual. The evidence for circumcision in ancient Egypt is abundant and spans millennia. from wall carvings in tombs dating back to the Old Kingdom around 2400 BCE, depicting the procedure being performed on standing men, to ancient medical texts that discuss its care, it was clearly a deeply embedded cultural norm. It was typically performed on adolescent boys, perhaps marking their transition into adulthood, or even on adults as a part of priestly initiation. Imagine the scene: a young boy, perhaps on the cusp of puberty, stands stoically or is held firmly, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and the solemnity of the moment. He might be surrounded by chanting priests, his family members, or other initiates, their faces etched with a blend of support and a shared understanding of the pain to come. The air might be thick with incense, masking the scent of blood, the rhythmic chants designed to fortify the spirit against the ordeal. The practitioner, perhaps a specialized priest-physician or a skilled circumciser, approaches with a sharp flint knife or a honed bronze blade, its edge glinting in the faint light. The procedure itself, performed without anesthesia, as we know, it would have been brutally quick and agonizing. The foreskin would be drawn forward, and with a swift, decisive cut, removed. The immediate pain would be immense, a shock to the nervous system, followed by intense burning and bleeding. The inherent risk of infection in a pre-antibiotic era, coupled with the lack of sterile technique, meant that post-operative complications were a constant threat. Fevers, swelling, and localized infections would have been common, sometimes leading to more severe conditions or even death. Yet, the profound cultural and religious significance often overshadowed the inherent pain and risk. For the Egyptians, circumcision was likely seen as a mark of purity, a dedication to the gods, a symbol of cleanliness required for temple service or entry into certain social strata. It was a physical manifestation of readiness for adulthood and responsibility, a painful yet necessary step towards belonging and spiritual alignment. The meticulous depictions in ancient tombs and papyri show the ritualistic nature of this ancient surgical act, highlighting its deep integration into the social and religious fabric of their society. It was not merely a medical intervention. It was a sacred etching, a permanent mark on the body reflecting a commitment to cultural and divine norms. That practice, though painful and risky, continued for millennia, a testament to the power of tradition and belief. It reminds us of a time when the body was not solely a biological entity, but a canvas upon which cultural and spiritual values were inscribed, often through means that defy our modern understanding of comfort and safety. As we withdraw from the ancient Egyptian ritual, leaving behind the young boy who has just undergone this painful rite, we are left with a chilling whisper of sacrifice and belonging. The memory of the ritual blade, etching the lines of tradition onto the flesh, echoes from a time when pain became a pathway to purity, to adulthood, and to a profound connection with the divine. It is a haunting reminder of how deeply embedded medical procedures could be within a society's core beliefs, and how physical suffering was often embraced as a necessary step towards a greater, enduring spiritual or social purpose. When the humours within the Roman body demanded expulsion, when ailments were believed to fester in the very seat of one's being, what relentless, undignified torment was administered to the innermost self, a cleansing from within that bordered on assault. Let us enter now the intimate, private spaces of a Roman bathhouse, or the quiet, secluded rooms of a patrician's villa. Here, in a society that valued hygiene and bodily maintenance, yet profoundly misunderstood internal physiology, enemas were a surprisingly common, and often aggressively deployed, medical intervention. The belief, again, was rooted in the prevailing humoral theory, which posited that health depended on the balance of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness, particularly those affecting the digestive system or causing sluggishness and fever, was often attributed to an accumulation of bad humors or putrefying waste within the intestines. The logical cure was to expel these perceived impurities, to cleanse the inner pathways and restore equilibrium. Imagine a patient, perhaps suffering from constipation or feeling a general malaise, a perceived excess of internal badness. They would be subjected to repeated, often large volume enemas, administered with a surprising array of specialized instruments. These could range from simple hollow reeds or animal bladders fitted with nozzles, to more elaborate bronze or ceramic syringes capable of delivering substantial quantities of fluid. The concoctions themselves were often as unsettling as the method of delivery. From strong purgative herbs designed to irritate the bowel, to concoctions of salt dissolved in water, various oils, or even, disturbingly, animal bile. These infusions were designed to induce violent, immediate bowel movements. The purpose was not merely to relieve constipation, but to thoroughly cleanse the entire digestive tract, flushing out perceived toxins and rebalancing the humors. The procedure itself would have been deeply uncomfortable, invasive, and profoundly undignified. The physical discomfort of the fluid being forced into the rectum, followed by the intense cramping and urgent need for evacuation, would have been immense. The repeated cycles of purging, the constant trips to the latrine, the physical exhaustion, and the emotional humiliation all would contribute to a profound sense of misery for the patient. For many, this aggressive internal cleansing would exacerbate their underlying condition, leading to dehydration, electrolyte imbalances, and further weakening of their already compromised systems. The physicians and practitioners of the time, well-meaning as they may have been, firmly believed in the efficacy of these extreme purges. The visible expulsion of fecal matter was seen as tangible proof that the badness was leaving the body, a reassuring sign that the treatment was working, even as the patient writhed in discomfort. The internal torment, the constant cramping, and distress were seen as necessary steps on the path to purification and health. The widespread use of enemas in Roman society highlights a medical philosophy that was intensely focused on visible outputs and tangible expulsions, rather than a nuanced understanding of internal bodily processes. It was a worldview that often prioritized aggressive intervention, believing that the more dramatic the expulsion, the more effective the cure. As the echoes of those ancient purges fade into the silence of time, and we contemplate the unseen battle waged within the patient's own body, we are left with a chilling reflection. The Roman enema, a medical practice born of flawed theory, yet embraced with unwavering conviction, underscores the often invasive and profoundly discomforting nature of ancient treatments. It is a haunting whisper from a time when the path to healing was often paved with intestinal torment, a grim testament to the desperate lengths to which humanity would go to rid itself of perceived impurities, even if it meant inflicting profound suffering upon the most intimate parts of the self. What unholy sacrifice! A profound severing of identity and potential was made in the desperate, often misguided, pursuit of eternal youth, enhanced beauty, or a divine, ethereal voice. Let us explore now a disturbing and often obscure practice in ancient Greece and beyond. A grim secret whispered in the shadows, where castration was performed not always as a punishment, but occasionally for perceived medical benefit or, in later eras, for chilling aesthetic goals. In the ancient world, the act of castration, The removal of the testes was primarily associated with punishment, slavery, or the creation of eunuchs to serve in harems, or as trusted administrators in powerful empires like Persia and Byzantium. But our focus here is on its less discussed, yet equally horrifying applications in the realm of medicine or aesthetic pursuit. Imagine a young boy, perhaps on the cusp of adolescence, subjected to this irreversible procedure. In some ancient belief systems, particularly concerning those believed to be touched by divine favor or suffering from specific ailments, castration was erroneously thought to prolong youth, to maintain a certain physical purity, or even to prevent the onset of certain diseases. The underlying rationale was often flawed, based on observations that eunuchs, indeed, did not develop secondary sexual characteristics in the same way as intact males. The agony of the procedure itself, performed without modern anesthesia, was just the beginning of a lifetime of profound alteration. The act itself would have been terrifying. The blade, the swift cut, the excruciating pain, the shock, and the inevitable, profuse bleeding. But the physical trauma was only the immediate horror. The long-term physical and psychological toll was immense. Without testosterone, the body would not develop in the usual masculine way. Bones might remain less, dense muscles less defined, and the voice would retain a childlike, high-pitched quality, a whisper of lost potential. The profound alteration of one's identity, the social stigma, and the psychological burden of such a state made it a truly horrifying fate. A life forever marked by an irreversible loss. In later periods, particularly in medieval and early modern Europe, this practice evolved into the chilling phenomenon of the castrati. These were boys, often from impoverished families, who were castrated before puberty to preserve their pure, high-singing voices, allowing them to perform intricate operatic and sacred music in churches where women were forbidden to sing. The pursuit of this voice of angels, this ethereal, otherworldly sound, led to the deliberate mutilation of thousands of boys, sacrificing their manhood for an aesthetic ideal. The whispers of these hidden practices, the desperate attempts to defy nature, to manipulate the human form for perceived advantage or a glimpse of the divine, echo through history. From the ancient belief in preserving youth to the later demand for an angelic voice, the act of castration remains a chilling testament to the lengths to which some societies would go, and the unspeakable suffering individuals endured for an elusive ideal. The silent, profound sorrow of the castrated, their bodies forever marked, their lives irrevocably altered, leaves a haunting impression, as the echoes of those ancient blades fade into the silence, and the ghostly sound of an unnaturally high voice seems to linger in the air. We are left with a haunting reflection. The practice of ancient Greek castration, in all its iterations, reminds us of the profound ethical questions that arise when medical understanding intertwines with cultural demand and desperate belief. It is a chilling whisper from a time when the very essence of one's being was sacrificed on the altar of a misguided ideal, a permanent scar etched onto the body in the hope of achieving something ethereal, something perceived as truly divine. Did the piercing obsidian, honed to a razor's edge, truly mend the body? Or was it a grim extension of a darker, divine will, a terrifying dance between healing and sacred violence? Journey now to the heart of the Aztec Empire, a vibrant, formidable civilization that flourished in the highlands of Mesoamerica before the arrival of the Spanish. Here, amidst the bustling markets, the intricate canals of Tenochtitlan, and the towering pyramids dedicated to bloodthirsty deities, Medicine was inextricably linked to cosmology, to sacrifice, and to the profound belief that blood was the sacred essence of life itself, a vital offering to keep the sun moving and the world from ending. The Aztecs possessed a sophisticated understanding of anatomy, gained not through formal dissection schools, but often through the grim realities of warfare, ritualistic sacrifice, and the observation of injuries. Their knowledge of herbal remedies was vast, their understanding of wound care surprisingly advanced in some respects. Yet, their surgical practices were often intertwined with deeply ingrained ritualistic elements, reflecting a worldview where every act, every affliction, was imbued with spiritual significance. Imagine the aftermath of a fierce flower war, or a more brutal conquest-driven conflict. Warriors, wounded by obsidian-tipped arrows or the fearsome Mukua Weetle, a wooden club edged with obsidian blades, would be brought to the healers. These healers, or Tisital, were skilled practitioners who understood the properties of plants, the setting of bones, and the mending of flesh. But when a deeper intervention was required, the very material that inflicted the wound, obsidian, was often the tool used for its repair. Picture the scene. A patient lies still, his body scarred by battle. The Tisital approaches, not with a metal scalpel, but with a blade crafted from obsidian, volcanic glass honed to an edge sharper than modern surgical steel. With terrifying precision, the Tisital might make an incision to drain an abscess, to set a broken bone, or to extract a foreign object. The surgical skill was undeniable, the cuts remarkably clean, yet the ritualistic context of their society imbued even these medical acts with a chilling undertone. The most terrifying example of the Aztec worldview's intersection with the body was their practice of human sacrifice. While not strictly medical in purpose, the ritualistic removal of hearts on top of temples, the flaying of skin, and the dismemberment of bodies provided the Aztec priests and specialists with an unparalleled, albeit brutal, understanding of human anatomy. This intimate knowledge of the living body's internal workings, gained through such violent means, undoubtedly informed their medical and surgical understanding, even if the primary purpose was religious appeasement. The sight of a pulsating heart, torn from a living chest, was not merely gruesome. It was a profound, sacred offering, believed to nourish the gods and sustain the cosmos. The stark, almost clinical efficiency of their obsidian tools, capable of terrifying precision, combined with a profound belief in the power of blood and sacrifice, casts a chilling shadow over their medical interventions. Healing was not simply a physical process. It was a negotiation with the divine, a plea for celestial favor, a rebalancing of the cosmic order. The patient's body, vulnerable and suffering, became a conduit for these larger, terrifying forces, as the echoes of the obsidian blade's sharp bite fade into the silence, and the ancient sense of blood and sacred offerings seemed to linger in the Mesoamerican air. We are left with a haunting reflection. The Aztec use of obsidian, both as a weapon and a healing tool, embodies a complex paradox. It reminds us of a time when the boundaries between healing and violence, between empirical observation and spiritual ritual, were utterly intertwined. The chilling whisper of the sacrificial cure, a desperate attempt to mend the body while appeasing the gods, echoes from a civilization that saw life, death, and suffering as part of a grand, terrifying cosmic dance where every drop of blood held both sacred power and the promise of a cure. When death, a relentless phantom cloaked in black, stalked the land, its breath a chilling miasma that claimed millions. What foul sweetness, what desperate, complex deception did medieval healers offer as a false solace, a futile shield against the inevitable? Immerse yourself now in the harrowing landscape of medieval Europe, a continent brought to its knees by the scourge of the Black Death and other devastating plagues that swept through towns and villages like a scythe through wheat. In the face of incomprehensible mortality, when bodies piled up faster than they could be buried, desperate remedies emerged, none more infamous or more grotesquely fascinating than the word treacle conjures images of thick, dark syrup, but in the medieval context, a treacle or theriac was far more than a simple sweetener. It was a complex, multi-ingredient concoction, a supposed panacea believed to be an antidote to poisons, a cure-all for diseases, and a powerful protective against the plague. Its origins stretched back to ancient Greece and Rome, but in the Middle Ages its complexity grew, reflecting a desperate alchemy driven by fear and ignorance. Imagine a plague victim, their body racked with agonizing fever, their skin covered in grotesque, swollen buboes, the terrifying hallmarks of the Black Death around them, the stench of death, the cries of the suffering, and the pervasive sense of doom. The physician, often powerless against the invisible enemy, would turn to the grand, celebrated treacle. This viscous, often repugnant mixture could contain dozens, sometimes hundreds, of ingredients, a bizarre pharmacopoeia reflecting every superstition and every available exotic substance. Picture the preparation: viper's flesh, dried and powdered, for its supposed antitoxic properties, opium to dull the agonizing pain, crushed pearls for their rarity and presumed magical potency, exotic spices from distant lands for their warmth and perceived medicinal virtues, and then the truly disturbing additions: powdered unicorn horn, if one could afford such an astronomical rarity, precious stones, dried animal parts, and a bewildering array of herbs, all mixed with honey or wine to form a thick, dark paste. The very act of preparing it was a ritual, a desperate attempt to gather all known powers against an unknown foe. The patient would be forced to consume this foul sweetness. Its putrid taste, the sheer quantity of bizarre ingredients, and its utter inefficacy against the raging infection, all contributing to a profound sense of despair. The desperate gulping down of such a noxious brew, the shudder that must have run through the patient's frame, speaks volumes about the utter lack of alternatives. The grim choice between slow suffering and a horrifying, yet perhaps hopeful, cure for the wealthy. The treacle might be prepared fresh. For the poor, it was likely an old, stale, perhaps even rancid version. The bitter irony, of course, was that such a sweet deception offered false solace in the face of inevitable demise. While some ingredients like opium might have provided temporary pain relief, none had any actual effect on the bacterial infection of the plague. In fact, many ingredients were either inert or actively harmful, adding further strain to an already weakened body. The elaborate charade, the unwavering belief in its power, provided a psychological comfort to both the afflicted and the desperate healers, a tangible act in the face of overwhelming helplessness, as the scent of ancient treacle, a mixture of pungent herbs and the cloying sweetness of deception, still seems to linger in the chill air of the medieval chamber. We are left with a haunting echo. The medieval treacle, with its bizarre ingredients and its false promise, embodies a period of profound fear and medical impotence. It is a chilling reminder of a time when the path to healing was often paved with the very substances that offered little more than a sweet, yet ultimately fatal, deception. The countless lives lost, despite the most elaborate and grotesque of remedies, stand as a testament to the plague's relentless power and humanity's desperate, often futile, struggle against an unseen or consuming darkness. When the relentless glare of the sun or the insidious touch of unseen affliction cause the light to fade from the eyes, what unspeakable remedies, what desperate applications were inflicted upon the most delicate of organs in ancient Egypt. Let us explore now the nuanced, yet often profoundly horrifying, world of ancient Egyptian ophthalmology, a branch of medicine that grappled constantly with one of the most common and debilitating ailments of their time, diseases of the eye. In a land bathed in perpetual sunlight, where fine dust and sand were ever present, and where hygiene practices, though advanced in some respects, still left much to be desired, eye infections, blindness, and other ocular ailments were rampant. The Ebers Papyrus and other ancient medical texts reveal a detailed, if often disturbing, pharmacopoeia of eye treatments, reflecting both empirical observation and deep-seated magical beliefs. Imagine a patient, perhaps a farmer or a scribe, suffering from a severe eye infection, their eyes red, swollen, weeping with pus, or perhaps their vision slowly dimming from cataracts. The pain would be constant, the fear of eternal darkness a heavy shadow. The Egyptian physician, or swen, would prepare his remedies, often with an air of solemn ritual. Picture the substances applied directly to the inflamed, sensitive surface of the eye. Some were benign, like honey, known for its antiseptic properties, but many were profoundly unsettling, verging on the grotesque. Concoctions could include human brains, ground into a paste and mixed with various liquids, then smeared onto the eyelids or directly into the eye itself. Imagine the cold, viscous sensation, the overwhelming thought of what you were applying, to the very window of your soul. Animal gall, particularly from pigs or turtles, was also used, believed to have curative properties. Its bitter, acrid nature perhaps thought to burn out the disease, and perhaps most insidiously, lead compounds, often in the form of galena lead sulfide used in coal eye makeup, were widely applied, not only for cosmetic purposes but also for purported medicinal benefits believed to protect against evil eye and infections. The direct application of such caustic, irritating, and frankly unhygienic materials would have caused immense pain, burning, and further inflammation. The risk of secondary infections, introduced by unsterilized hands or contaminated ingredients, was ever present, often leading to exacerbation of the original problem or even permanent blindness. The patient, enduring these painful applications, would have done so with a profound, almost blind faith in the healer's wisdom, believing that the suffering was a necessary part of the cure. The constant fear of losing one's sight, an unbearable prospect in a visually rich world, drove them to accept almost any intervention. The elaborate rituals, the prayers to deities like Horus, whose eye was a symbol of protection and healing, and the sheer invasiveness of some treatments reveal a blend of medical observation and magical belief. The physician was not just a healer. He was an intermediary between the suffering mortal and the powerful gods. The use of lead in eye makeup, while popular for its cosmetic effect, may have indeed offered some protection from sun glare, but its long-term, cumulative toxicity would have silently contributed to health issues, including neurological problems and, ironically, even visual impairment over time. As the ancient dust settles over the remains of Egyptian healing chambers and the ghosts, of countless suffering eyes seem to watch from the shadows, we are left with a haunting echo. The Egyptian eye treatments, with their bizarre ingredients and profound invasive nature, remind us of a time when the quest for sight often led to further suffering, and the very act of applying a remedy inflicted agony. It is a chilling whisper from a civilization that embraced both scientific observation and deep superstition, where the line between healing and horror was blurred, and where blind faith in their remedies often led to true, irreversible darkness. When the ancient earth reluctantly yielded its secrets. Disturbed after millennia of silent vigil, what macabre discoveries, what haunting evidence of suffering and desperation emerged from the profound darkness of ancient tombs. Let us delve now into the hushed, dust-filled chambers beneath the surface of the ancient world, into the burial sites and catacombs that served as final resting places for the dead. Here, among the skeletal remains and crumbling artifacts, archaeologists have unearthed chilling evidence of medical practices that offer a stark, unvarnished glimpse into the brutal realities of ancient healing. These are not the grand, celebrated stories of medical triumphs, but the silent, often gruesome, narratives etched into human bone. Imagine the hushed awe, tinged with a profound sense of discomfort, as excavators carefully uncover a skeleton, perhaps in a Roman necropolis or a Neolithic burial mound, and then the discovery, a skull bearing a clear, undeniable trepanation. Whole, not just a small perforation, but a gaping aperture. The edges of the bone around the hole show signs of healing, indicating that the person survived the agonizing procedure, perhaps for years, carrying this permanent mark of desperation. What pain or madness drove them to such an ordeal? The bone itself refuses to tell, only offering its silent, chilling testament. Further discoveries reveal other horrors. Skeletons with severely malformed limbs, bearing evidence of crude, unsuccessful bone settings or amputations that led to excruciating deformities. Imagine the daily pain, the profound disability, the struggle for survival in a world that had little compassion for the infirm. Perhaps a leg, shattered in an accident, was bound with splints, but healed at a grotesque angle, leaving the individual to hobble for the rest of their short, painful life. Or a bone, infected after a primitive surgical intervention, shows signs of chronic osteomyelitis, a festering, painful infection that would have slowly consumed the bone from within, leading to a drawn-out, agonizing demise. Then there are the dental horrors. Skulls with teeth worn down to the roots, evidence of a coarse, abrasive diet. But more disturbing are the signs of brutal tooth extractions, shattered jawbones, massive abscesses that perforated the bone, clear indications of crude attempts to alleviate dental pain that often left behind far worse trauma. Some skulls show attempts at dental prosthetics, with crude gold bands or wires attempting to hold loose teeth. A testament to the vanity and suffering that transcended even the grave. The examination of mummified remains, particularly from ancient Egypt or Peru, offers an even more visceral insight. The bodies, preserved for millennia, reveal the effects of parasitic diseases, tuberculosis and leprosy, along with the often futile interventions used to treat them. Evidence of crude surgeries, sometimes successful, but often leading to severe scarring or further complications, is starkly visible. The very act of embalming, as we have seen, involved its own set of disturbing practices, a necessary desecration for a spiritual preservation. These macabre discoveries are not merely archaeological curiosities, they are direct, visceral connections. to the physical suffering of our ancient ancestors, a silent accusation against the limitations of their knowledge, and a testament to their profound resilience in the face of pain. Each bone, each healed fracture, each evidence of invasive surgery whispers a story of desperation, of misguided hope, and of the raw reality of survival in a world without modern medicine, as the dust motes dance in the faint light filtering into these ancient tombs, and the silence of millennia seems to press in around the unearthed remains. We are left with a haunting reflection. The macabre discoveries within these ancient sepulchres serve as a chilling reminder that the journey of healing has been a long, brutal one, filled with desperate gambles and profound suffering. It is a whispered tale from the grave, revealing the hidden agony endured in the relentless, timeless human struggle against disease, a haunting testament to the brutal, unvarnished truth of ancient medical practices, unearthed from the very heart of oblivion. When the body succumbed to unseen forces, and the healer sought remedies beyond the familiar, what perilous journeys, what desperate expeditions were undertaken into the vast, untamed landscapes of the ancient world, all to find a cure for a suffering soul. Let us embark now on a different kind of journey, not through the body's internal landscape, but across the external world, tracing the paths of those who ventured into the unknown, driven by the relentless quest for exotic ingredients and powerful remedies. In antiquity, the knowledge of medicinal plants, rare minerals, and potent animal parts was often confined to specific regions, or held as closely guarded secrets by shamans, priests, and alchemists. When a common ailment resisted local remedies, or when a ruler faced a debilitating, mysterious illness, the search for a cure could ignite ambitious, often perilous, expeditions into distant, uncharted territories. These were not journeys of conquest, but of desperate medical necessity. Imagine a caravan, laden with provisions and armed guards, setting out from a bustling Roman city, bound for the distant, mist-shrouded forests of Germania, or the arid plains of Arabia, or perhaps the mysterious lands of the East. Their mission, to acquire a rare herb known only to a secluded tribe, a precious mineral rumored to possess potent healing properties, or the venom of a particular serpent believed to be an antidote to a widespread affliction. The journey itself would be fraught with peril. Treacherous mountain passes, vast deserts, hostile tribes, wild beasts, and the constant threat of disease. Many would not return. Consider the legends surrounding figures like Mithridates, the sixth of Pontus, a king consumed by the fear of poisoning. He reportedly experimented with antidotes on condemned criminals, meticulously documenting the effects of various toxins and their supposed antidotes. His famous concoction, known as Mithridacium, contained dozens of ingredients, some incredibly rare and sourced from the furthest reaches of his known world. To maintain his immunity, he supposedly consumed small, increasing doses of poisons, requiring a constant supply of exotic, often dangerous, components. The acquisition of these ingredients would have spurred countless perilous expeditions into distant lands, a grand, continuous search for the ultimate prophylactic. Another example can be found in the desperate search for unicorn horn, often powdered narwhal, tusk, or rhinoceros horn in medieval Europe. Believed to be a universal antidote to poisons and a powerful cure-all for countless diseases, its rarity meant that only the wealthiest could afford it. This led to arduous journeys, often by intrepid merchants or royal agents, across vast oceans and treacherous land routes, all in pursuit of this mythical, yet highly coveted, remedy. The allure of such a potent, yet utterly ineffective, cure drove individuals to face incredible dangers. These expeditions were born of a profound fear of the unknown, an acknowledgement that the most potent remedies lay hidden, perhaps guarded, by spirits or found only in remote, sacred places. The very act of venturing into these wild, untamed regions was a ritual in itself, a testament to the desperate hope that a rare, powerful ingredient could turn the tide against relentless illness. For the ailing patient, each such journey represented a whisper of hope, a desperate gamble that salvation lay just beyond the horizon, in a place unseen and untouched by common knowledge. As the sun sets over the ancient trade routes and the dust of countless perilous journeys settles into the silence, we are left with a haunting reflection. The desperate expeditions into the unknown past, driven by the relentless quest for exotic cures, remind us of humanity's ceaseless struggle against the limitations of knowledge. It is a chilling whisper from a time when the path to healing was often paved with profound risk, where the ultimate remedy was believed to reside not in understanding, but in the distant, dangerous corners of the earth. A poignant testament to the lengths to which desperation would drive both healer and patient. Asterisk, when the wound, a festering gateway to death, refused to close. When gangrene crept and blood refused to clot, what searing solution, what agonizing, fiery embrace did medieval surgeons wield, and at what horrifying cost to the living flesh? Let us return now to the unforgiving landscape of medieval medicine, a world where the simplest cut could become a death sentence, where infection was an invisible enemy, and where the most potent tools were often those that inflicted the most profound pain. In this era, without antibiotics or even a rudimentary understanding of germ theory, any open wound was a profound threat. Infection, often known as corruption or putrefaction, would swiftly set in, turning healthy flesh into a black, oozing mess, sending fever through the body, and ultimately leading to a drawn-out, agonizing death. When bleeding was profuse, or when a wound became deeply infected and refused to heal, the medieval surgeon had a desperate, yet highly effective, tool at his disposal: cauterization. Imagine a patient, perhaps a soldier with a deep, persistent wound, or a peasant suffering from an intractable ulcer, brought to the surgeon. The pain of their existing condition would already be immense, but what awaited them was a torment of a different order. There was no true pain relief beyond the patient's own fortitude, or perhaps a gulp of strong, numbing wine. The surgeon, often a barber surgeon, with a grim determination, would prepare his instruments. This might involve a specialized iron rod, perhaps shaped into a point or a flat surface, or even a simpler fire-heated blade. The rod would be placed into a roaring fire, sometimes within a brazier right next to the patient, until its tip glowed a menacing, angry cherry red, radiating an unbearable heat. The air would thicken with anticipation and dread. Then, with a chilling deliberation, the surgeon would apply this searing hot iron directly to the bleeding vessel, the infected tissue, or the surface of the intractable wound. The immediate reaction would be a terrifying, visceral one, a searing, agonizing scream from the patient, a primal cry of pain that would echo through the chamber. The flesh would sizzle, hiss, and crackle as it made contact with the incandescent metal. Smoke, with its sickening, sweet, acrid scent of burning human tissue, would rise into the air, filling the nostrils of all present, a pungent reminder of the brutal act being performed. The very act of living tissue being consumed by fire was a horrifying spectacle. The purpose was clear: to stop severe bleeding by coagulating the blood. effectively sealing the vessels, or to destroy diseased, gangrenous tissue, creating a sterile barrier against further infection, and often it worked. The bleeding would cease, the spread of infection might be halted, but at what cost? The pain was beyond imagining, the trauma to the body immense. The scars, deep and disfiguring, would be a permanent mark of the ordeal. For the medieval mind. The fire was also a purifying agent, a divine force that could burn out the corruption of disease. The intensity of the suffering was often seen as a necessary part of the healing, a kind of ordeal by fire that cleansed the body and soul. The profound resilience of those who endured and survived such barbaric interventions speaks volumes about the human capacity for pain and the absolute desperation in the face of rampant disease. As the flickering flames of the cautery iron dim in the medieval chamber, and the faint, unsettling scent of burning flesh still seems to linger, we are left with a haunting reflection. The medieval cauterization, with its searing heat and its agonizing screams, embodies a period of medical brutality born of necessity. It is a chilling whisper from a time when the path to healing was often paved with unimaginable pain, where the very act of burning the body was believed to cleanse the soul, leaving behind only the profound, silent testimony of a human struggle against death, etched forever into the smoking flesh. When the body refused to release, when the vital fluids were trapped within, causing agonizing distension and profound discomfort, what terrifying instruments, crafted of bronze and desperation, brought excruciating relief, piercing the very boundaries of privacy and pain. Let us descend into the intimate, hidden suffering endured by countless individuals in ancient Rome afflicted with urinary retention, a common and agonizing condition caused by various ailments, from prostate issues to infections or nerve damage. In a world without antibiotics, without modern diagnostics, and without effective muscle relaxants, the inability to urinate was a medical emergency, leading to immense pain, kidney damage, and ultimately death. Faced with such a crisis, the Roman physician, or medicus, had a desperate, yet highly invasive, solution: catheterization. Imagine a patient, perhaps a man of advanced years, lying prostrate, his abdomen distended, his face contorted with the unbearable pain of a full bladder unable to empty. The air in the chamber would be thick with tension and the smell of desperation. The physician would bring forth his instruments, long slender tubes crafted from bronze, or sometimes copper, designed to be inserted directly into the urethra, navigating its tortuous path to reach the bladder. These ancient catheters, while sometimes possessing rudimentary curves to aid insertion, were far from the flexible, sterile instruments of today. They were rigid, often unpolished, and certainly not germ-free. The procedure itself would have been profoundly agonizing and utterly undignified. Without anesthesia, the patient would be fully conscious, experiencing every searing sensation as the rigid metal tube was forced slowly, relentlessly, into the delicate urethral passage, the pain of the catheter scraping against the sensitive lining, the tearing of tissue, the immense pressure and burning sensation as it advanced towards the bladder. All would be compounded by the pre-existing agony of urinary retention. The patient's cries, their involuntary movements, their profound humiliation would fill the chamber. Beyond the immediate, searing pain, the risks were immense. The unsterile nature of the instruments, the lack of gloves or antiseptic solutions, meant that the very act of relieving the blockage often introduced far more dangerous pathogens. Urinary tract infections were almost a certainty, often ascending into the kidneys, leading to pyelonephritis and frequently to a systemic infection that would consume the body from within. The internal trauma caused by the rigid catheter could lead to strictures, scarring, and long-term incontinence or further blockages, adding layers of chronic suffering to the initial acute pain. The stoicism required to endure such an invasive and undignified procedure, often without adequate pain relief, speaks volumes about the desperation of those afflicted and the stark realities of ancient medical intervention. For many, the brief, agonizing relief of a drained bladder was quickly followed by the insidious onset of a far more dangerous infection, turning a temporary reprieve into a slow, agonizing demise, as the echoes of those ancient, unseen agonies fade into the silence, and the chilling glint of a bronze catheter seems to shimmer in the historical gloom. We are left with a haunting reflection. The ancient Roman practice of catheterization, a procedure born of dire necessity yet inflicting profound suffering, reminds us of the relentless human struggle against the body's own failures. It is a chilling whisper from a time when the path to relief was often paved with unseen agony, where the very act of healing involved a profound, painful violation, leaving behind only the profound, silent testimony of lives lived in discomfort, forever marked by the cruel necessities of ancient medicine, when all else failed, when the prayers grew hoarse and the remedies proved useless. What final, horrifying cure awaited the countless victims of the plague? Not in a healer's chamber, but in the vast, communal embrace of the earth itself. Let us conclude our harrowing journey through ancient medical practices in the grim, suffocating reality of the Black Death's relentless grip on medieval Europe, a pandemic that transcended all human understanding and defied every desperate attempt at healing. In the mid-14th century, a silent, unseen enemy swept across the known world, carried on the breath of trade winds and the scurrying paws of rats. The bubonic plague, with its horrifying buboes, its agonizing fevers, and its swift, merciless death, rendered all existing medical knowledge utterly impotent. Physicians, priests, and common folk alike were powerless. The elaborate humoral theories, the bizarre concoctions, the desperate bloodletting all proved futile against a disease that consumed entire families, entire villages, entire cities, in a matter of days. Imagine the scene, the narrow, crowded streets of a medieval city, once bustling with life, now eerily silent, save for the tolling of death bells, ceaseless and mournful. The stench of decay hung heavy in the air, mixing with the desperate sweet scent of burning herbs, meant to ward off the contagion. Bodies, once vibrant with life, now lay stiff and cold in their homes, or abandoned in the streets, too numerous for individual burials. The sheer scale of death, the incomprehensible mortality rate, sometimes half, or even 2/3 of a population, meant that the very fabric of society began to unravel, when individual graves became impossible to dig, when the living were too few or too terrified to perform proper rites. The concept of a cure dissolved entirely, replaced by the grim finality of the plague pit. Picture these horrifying sights, hastily dug, massive trenches, sometimes dozens of feet deep and wide. Outside the city walls, into these yawning chasms, bodies were thrown, men, women, children, rich and poor, alike without ceremony, often naked or wrapped in simple shrouds. Layers upon layers of corpses, stacked haphazardly, their limbs intertwined, their faces frozen in agony. Their final resting place, a communal grave of profound suffering. The grim efficiency of the plague pits was born of sheer desperation. It was no longer about treating the sick. It was about containing the dead, removing the source of the overwhelming stench and the terrifying visual reminder of rampant death. The living, often healthy, were forced into direct contact with the dying and the dead, accelerating the spread of the contagion. The very act of mass burial, while necessary, became a vector of further infection. The breakdown of social order was complete. Families abandoned the sick, priests refused last rites, and the very structure of communities crumbled under the weight of fear and despair. Medical knowledge, once a source of comfort, became irrelevant. The only cure that remained was the final, brutal silence of the grave. The pits themselves were a grim testament to humanity's utter defeat in the face of an incomprehensible biological force. As the echoes of the plague bells fade into the silence of centuries, and the ghost of the medieval plague pits seems to stretch across the ravaged landscape, we are left with a haunting reflection. The final, fatal cure of the plague pit embodies a period of unparalleled human suffering and medical impotence. It is a chilling whisper from a time when the very act of dying was stripped of dignity, when hope was extinguished by an invisible enemy, and when the only path to peace was found in the cold, crowded embrace of the earth itself. It stands as a stark and powerful reminder that even the most elaborate attempts at healing can be rendered utterly meaningless in the face of an all-consuming darkness, leaving behind only the profound, silent testament of millions lost to the void.